a lot to cover, and we want to try to get as much covered as we possibly can in terms of massive agenda. It's just a couple short items, but
Just two.
just two.
We'll be
out of here by 8. So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We do have a couple of the planning board members that are unable to be here. Mark has instructed them they need to watch the video.
Yes, 3 times.
Yeah, 3 times. So we're not going to go around and do introductions. We have our names here. We've met a number of times together. I think this is our 5th meeting together. And we have a couple more after this. I think everybody got an email today which indicated that due to the depth of information that we're going to be covering and the complexity and the fact that we're dealing now, this is what they've been threatening to give us, the real work here. And so now it's here in front of us, and this is the policy stuff, and this is really the real chunky stuff that we need to work through. So because of that, we recognize that this may run long. It really doesn't seem quite fair to give each of these plans an hour and 15 minutes tonight and we're done. So we're going to go as far as we can with the comp plan tonight, and hopefully we'll have that wrapped, and then what time we have left, we'll go ahead and start in on the transportation master plan, and then we will be moving, continuing this meeting then into Monday the 19th.
We go really fast tonight. Can we skip Monday?
I don't know. We can, but I don't think we should go really fast. But so Monday night, the planning board our planning commission had a meeting, study session set up. So we will just join in that and continue the conversation through the transportation master plan. And then we have, like I said, a couple more our joint meetings together after that where we'll be diving into additional topics and conversations. So we do really need to get this wrapped up too so that the team can start to work on what kind of conclusions we're going to this. So I just want one housekeeping thing and then I'll turn it over to Mark. Because we're all going to probably have a lot of questions or comments and things like that, I think what would be best is if you just write down what your questions are, write down your comments. If you have notes that you have made on the document, keep track of those. If we don't get to your questions and comments tonight, then submit those to staff, and they will run those through the gauntlet, get the answers, and then disperse that back to all of us. Hopefully before Monday, if we need to go to Monday, we'll go there. So that means everybody will get their questions answered. And if it's not a question, it's just a thought, go ahead and include that. All of those things are important. But we will try to make sure that everybody who has questions, comments, concerns gets their voices heard tonight. But obviously we have 2 large boards here. We're also going to I'm going to be pretty rigid about, we're not going to do any speech making. We're not going to do any of that type of thing. If we've got some real substantive questions and comments that'll keep us moving forward.
Did you bring your bill?
Okay. No, I left the bell.
Now I want the bell.
I got Kyle. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark for a few comments, and then Kathleen will kick us off.
All right, well, thanks, Mayor. I thought we'd just take a moment here and kind of reflect about where we've been over the last 18 months and about what this evening is really about. So we have spent an enormous amount of time and energy here with our community trying to first understand the values, talk with them about kind of the vision of our community here for the next 20 years. We've talked in terms of kind of the important land use issues, future land use, transportation issues. And so we've done a lot of work here as staff and with our consultant teams to try to listen the best we could. And so what's before you is our attempt to capture what we heard. And so I think here this evening is, in my opinion, kind of one of the biggest decisions the city will make for a long time. And that is the policy decision, the policy direction that the city will go for the next 20 years. That's the potential of this. So we all know kind of our history here and why this has been important to us, but this is a big milestone for us this evening here and for the next month or more. And obviously, we're still targeting October here for the adoption of both the comp plan and the transportation master plan. So I'm excited. I think the opportunity that we have here starting this evening to kind of take this public comment and decide the policy issues is monumental. So on that issue of policy, I would highly recommend that when we look and talk about these two documents, that we talk in terms of what is the policy decision that we're trying to make, the higher elevation decision. A lot of what we're going to get to perhaps later will be implementation kind of strategies. And one example that's clear is we're trying to set the policy direction for future land use in the comp plan. How that gets implemented is the code update that will come next year. In the case of the TMP, Transportation Master Plan, we're making high-level policy decisions about what we want to consider here for the next 20 years. And so the implementation strategy from the TMP will be eventually come back, maybe through the Transportation Mobility Board, maybe through Public Works, maybe both other agencies, come back perhaps in strategies and 5-year plans. And so again, I would try to emphasize that our discussion here this evening and here quite honestly for the next month or more, let's try to stay at the policy level and identify the key issues. And again, I would reiterate what the mayor said, whatever questions you've got, write them down and send to Kathleen specifically, and we'll make sure that we get those answered. If you believe you want an opportunity to sit down with staff or a consultant team to talk about anything, we will do that. That is our commitment to this body, these two bodies. So you need time to talk through these issues, we will do that. And so this is just our opportunity here now to take a step that has been real difficult for our city, and again, in my opinion, pretty monumental. So I think with that, I'm going to look maybe to Kathleen to kick us off here.
Yeah. So good evening, welcome, Kathleen Osher. It's a pleasure to be back with you this evening, and a pleasure to deliver these drafts when we said we would. And I want to first recognize the incredible effort, from other members of our staff and our consultant teams to get to this point. It has been a tremendous process for us internally, but most importantly, the greater community process that we started on last year in March of 2018 when council made that decision that in order to do the plans that we need to do for the next 20 years, we really need to be on the same page. And so last year we went out and did as much listening as we can, right? So we went out with the biggest 2 ears that we could possibly have and say, what do you think? What are the things that you love? What are the things that you see for the next 20 years? We didn't talk much about vision. We talked about what do you want to see for the next 20 years? The city's working on plans for the next 20 years. And so through that process of listening, we constantly, furiously took notes. And the result of those notes is now in these two drafts. We kick off a public comment period that lasts until September 16th. That'll close at 5 p.m. on September 16th. That comment period is both for you individually as a body, but it is also for our entire community. So this becomes an ongoing and open conversation over the next month. And so this evening gives us a chance to sort of ground you in the drafts that we're looking at. We're going to really try and go through this introduction very quickly so that we can get right to the discussion. And again, that discussion will try and center, much like you're looking at in front of you, those pages where the goals, policies, and action framework are sort of embedded in both documents. And so we'll try and ground that conversation in those places. I want to echo our city manager's comments. Whatever you need to get to a greater comfort level, get your questions answered, we are 100% available for that. That is true for you, that is true for the community. So as you find that there are questions, we are more than happy to make the time to guide people through how we got to and where those notes kind of came from. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary to get us kicked off with the comprehensive plan. And then, like I said, we'll quickly go through that introduction. Some of that will just be repeat, right? And then we'll launch right into that conversation.
Before I start, I want to recognize Meredith Dang, who has been listening along with me for 18 months.
4 years.
Yep. Very quickly, the content. The color that's in land use community character housing, that color, those are the core elements of this plan. Transportation is the link to the TMP. That's where we will especially be linked along with land use. I should mention on the comprehensive plan side, we focused on the words on the paper right now, didn't try to dress up the document, so that's why it's mostly text. But in those core sections, what you'll see is this structure where it does talk about past plans the city has done, plans and studies, a short list of key issues, that framework for action portion. We really emphasize partners. When we started this work, the city had just identified its 3 strategic imperatives, one of which was partnerships. So we've really tried to highlight partners, public, private, nonprofit, in all these areas. I think I've mentioned this multiple times during this process, but we like to focus on these 5 types of actions when we get down to the action level. In the implementation portion of the plan, it also emphasizes the roles of the groups here, City Council, Planning Commission, and staff, and city management. So that's emphasized in implementation. This document has incorporated now the vision phase work. The vision and guiding principles is embedded within the comprehensive plan. And as one example of how this process has played out over the last 18 months, an example of just some of the literal quotes that we heard 18 months ago, somebody mentioning parks among one of the things they value about Littleton. That turned into a core value that we emphasized in the vision report last year, talking about the outdoors and stewardship. That translated into a guiding principle of being an active community and how that ties to parks and recreation opportunities. In the comprehensive plan now, at that goal, policy, and action level, it flows through down to the specifics of trying to close gaps in the trail system in the area. So from input to vision principles, all the way down to actions. That's what we're after in this document. On the map side, we can go through these maybe in more detail when we get to the map, but just big picture, the map has changed a fair amount since some of you last saw it. Staff has a list of all the specific changes that we made, but on a big picture level, we eliminated a couple of categories. So still consolidating that list. We added a category. There was discussion of having a category just around Main Street, just the core of downtown, then the broader downtown area, then that urban downtown transition category that we had. We changed there was a category called urban neighborhood, which some may recall started out as neighborhood conservation. It's now called mixed character core neighborhood. The point was, these are some of the blocks, and it's the brown on the map. It's some of those older neighborhoods that do have rear alleys, but people do use driveways out front, and it is kind of a mix of character. But it's close to downtown, so that's the characteristic there. The corridor mixed use category has increased in some areas, it's reduced in other areas based on discussion. And on this map, the major corridors are called out: Bellevue, Littleton Boulevard, Mineral, Santa Fe, Broadway. Those 5 corridors as special planning areas going forward. And again, another link to the transportation plan. Just some of the numbers, which are in the land use section, but on the land use side, if you think of it as residential, commercial, obviously this being a largely residential community, but all that park and open space, as we've talked about. On the character side, I was just mentioning to somebody before the meeting, as I've said before, this is the only community I've worked with that has this amount of suburban character and what Littleton is so much known for. So that really stands out in that portion of the plan. And final slide, looking ahead, these comprehensive plans, we've talked big picture about what they do. Ultimately, is to help you make decisions. It's tied to all these other levels in this graphic at the department level, council level, all these levels of setting your plans tied to this overall planning. And then the timeframes. You'll find things in this plan that the city's not ready for, but the seed is planted for 10, 15 years from now. There's things you can do next week. So it's all these different timeframes, and that bottom corner, I think this city just needs to focus on getting some things done, not try to do a bunch of things all at once. Yes, be ambitious, but get some things done. So I'm stopping there.
All right, page 42. That's where I started. I think what I would really want to emphasize as we have these discussions is that the key issues and considerations are directly what we've heard either through conversation here at Joint Leadership, other community listening sessions when we've been out, and generally in the community talking to members here. And I think based on those issues and considerations that we heard, then this note-taking process kind of resulted in a series of goals and policies. And so we can kind of run through those, but you can also take a look at them and we can launch right into land use and community character.
Yeah, I can just say the key issues list for land use really sets the stage for the rest of the sections because it's everything has a land use component to it, housing, economic development, parks. So all these other topics, transportation included, are kind of touched on here, and then the later sections dive deeper into those particular topics. So this is the land use perspective on these issues.
Would it help if we kind of looked at goal 1, and if there's comments or questions on goal 1, we deal with that. If there aren't, then we move to goal 2. So let's start with goal 1. And Kathleen, if you don't mind just reading that aloud.
Yeah, I will. Goal number 1, a land use allocation and pattern that supports and promotes Littleton's pride in and reputation for quality neighborhoods and an abundance of parks and preserved open space.
Comments or questions? Goal 2.
A sustained focus on the long-term fiscal sustainability of Littleton city government while recognizing the direct connection to the city's land use mix, especially for sales tax revenue needs.
Comments or questions? Goal 3.
Ongoing and effective collaboration between land use and transportation planning and implementation to ensure compatibility among decisions and actions taken with respect to each.
Goal 4.
A more attractive community based on quality design and character of both private development and the public realm.
Policy 1.
Emphasize compatible intensities and character when evaluating applications involving more intense and/or non-residential development near homes and neighborhoods.
Policy 2.
Plan for and take actions to ensure the ongoing integrity of its residential neighborhoods from the oldest established to the newly developed.
3.
During development and building, excuse me, yes.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Does integrity include quality? Because some of the neighborhoods might benefit from a little revitalization or painting or who knows what, but
It may not mention it here, but neighborhood quality is mentioned elsewhere.
well, I know it is, but it was just that piece, since that's a high-level statement, that I thought might also capture it. But I just raised an issue and may or may not be worth it.
Yeah, I think that is the intent of what we've heard.
I think
Yes.
that's captured in the goal 4. Sentiment.
I agree. All right, goal 3. Excuse me, Bruce.
One quick question. We deal with this periodically when we're looking at neighborhoods that have had elements of transition already occur in them. So neighborhoods are not static. I mean, some are more static than others, but when you talk about ensure the ongoing integrity of residential neighborhoods, where you've had some infill or some development, redevelopment that has taken place, that now is the character of the neighborhood. I think of what was the church that we had looked at that was, yeah, east of Littleton Heights area kind of thing. Talk a little bit about what does integrity mean when we are looking at a neighborhood that has some newer development that theoretically was approved or was used by right already occurring?
Before we continue with that, I would like to go back to the guidelines you gave us at the beginning, that we save our questions and talk to staff on.
Well, we can have, I think some discussion is good, but once we need to keep moving, so as long as we keep moving.
If we have an extended discussion about integrity, that's.
Well, we have a couple questions,
Okay.
we'll move on. Yeah. Go ahead. You can
Okay.
answer Bruce's question.
Integrity since it's within the land use chapter, I think of in terms of other types of land use, non-residential, that may be on the edges of a neighborhood, or if somebody proposes something within the neighborhood. So I think of it in terms of land use compatibility. This is not about historic integrity or those kind of things. So it's the land use concept.
Additional verbiage to help contextualize that may be something to consider.
I have concerns about that particular word as well. I think it may be misconstrued or misinterpreted.
Okay. And I know that's a word we're pulling through from the adopted vision, that's used in that first of the 6 bullet points of that, what we're striving for. So I think that's why that word's being mirrored. Okay.
Policy
Right,
3.
some more. So 3, during development and building permit review processes, focus on the land use context around school campuses to promote a safe and conducive environment for learning and other on-campus activities.
Rena?
I had a hard time, I couldn't easily relate this back to a particular goal. That's the first clarification, if you can share that with me. And then some of what we're hearing in the neighborhoods is also how schools are affecting the neighborhoods. And in this case, we're more talking about how the schools remain safe and conducive to learning. So I don't know if this sentence completely captures our intent as we talk about this section, which is about the neighborhoods.
Yeah, you mentioned first that it may not flow directly from a goal.
I can't relate back to a goal, maybe.
Sure. And one thing we try to do is make connections across the different parts of the plan. So in the housing and neighborhood section next, it talks about how schools are important to neighborhoods as a piece of quality neighborhoods. So it's kind of looking at it from the two sides. So here, it was just all the things we've heard about, that schools bring people to the community, how important they are to the community. So it may not be directly flowing from one of those goals, but it's trying to hit that point in the land use chapter, the importance of schools.
I wonder if it really even goes there, because it says in the beginning, during development and building permit review process, not ongoing forever, that we need to be aware of the environment around schools. It just says during the development and review process. So after that, it's like, nope.
It really connects back to one of the points on the issues list where it does talk about the importance of a quality school system. So that's the connection we were trying to make.
I wonder if it'd be more impactful statement just to actually remove the whole school point of it, just say during development, building review process, focus on the land use context to promote a safe and conducive environment.
I like that.
So you could apply that to schools, you could apply that to a commercial area, you could apply that, it could go back and forth between school to neighborhood, neighborhood to school.
But you gotta have something conducive for. I mean, if you're going to be conducive, you gotta know what it's conducing.
Conducing something, just conducing.
Okay, you guys got some good input on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think, and what I'm hearing is a little bit more balance in that and not just calling out one.
Yeah, school
Yeah.
kind of came out of left field for me. Okay, so number 4?
4, create a regulatory framework for residential development that minimizes obstacles to developing diverse and attainable housing options in Littleton and in terms of type, size, and cost to buyers and renters.
Mark?
Well, of all the paragraphs, I have the most problem with this one right here, the whole document. It seems like an innocuous little statement, but what does that mean? Zoning code is an obstacle? Does that mean that we're going to change R8 to R5? When you talk about attainable housing options, that's a code word for more density because of the sheer cost of building and acquiring land. So I think this needs to be cleaned up so that that it's not saying that all areas of Littleton are going to, have to get denser, have to rezone, et cetera. It has to be clarified. Because there's a danger in this thing.
Carol?
I'd like to suggest that putting that in the positive instead of the negative might help with clarity.
It might be
Right now,
saying-
it's minimizes obstacles, and if it could put enhances whatever, it might be easier.
Enhances
Or
opportunities.
encourages.
Opportunities.
Oh, rather than the hammer, give the cookie, okay.
Okay, you guys got enough on that? You good?
Yes.
Okay.
5 is create a regulatory framework for non-residential development that signals the city's interest in attracting target business sectors, needed and compatible revenue-generating uses and lifestyle and leisure uses that support Littleton's livability and the residents' quality of life.
Okay. 6.
Manage land use patterns near Littleton's many parks, trails, greenways, and open spaces to protect their ecological functions, prevent physical and other impactful encroachments, maintain public access, and preserve their overall quality and value, especially where public green spaces contribute to neighborhood character and enhance business park and other commercial settings.
Okay.
Recognize and promote land use and development decisions that further community objectives for reduced traffic congestion, enhanced walkability and biking opportunities, and expanded and viable public transit options.
Carol?
Walkability is a word you and I have talked about it that means two completely different things depending on who you're talking to. In Kendrick Keith's books, walkability means the buildings go all the way to the sidewalk, there's no break in the buildings, so that people feel that there is something to protect them and look at for the whole time. For much of our community, walkability means things like open space, trees, nice sidewalks. We need to get that cleared up. Which of those definitions walkability means?
I have to disagree. We promote walkability in the most rural area to the most urban. It's not the implication.
Okay, I'll find it in the book and point out what, it's a very clear section about walkability means. So you're saying it means not that, though?
Well, certainly here, it's in a city context and wanting people to be able to walk safely, so it's in that context.
And that's what it means, to be able to walk safely.
Right, right.
I would like to have a definition, I don't remember if it's in there or not, but I would like to have a definition with the other definitions of exactly what walkability means, and then I wouldn't have to look up the other one. And that means I'd have to borrow the book from Robin.
Okay. Number 8?
So, I have a
Peggy?
question. When I read that one, immediately comes to my mind these big circling monstrosity entrance exit viaducts off of multiple streets and whatever. Because to have those is going to have this effect in one sense. And that's the last thing I want to see, any more of those god-awful structures. And of course, we've got Santa Fe, which probably is going to get more of them, but.
I think this, if we're on number 7, it's more about just recognizing really the trip generation that comes out of land uses, whether people are driving, walking, need to take transit.
If you're going to reduce traffic congestion, that's something that isn't necessarily involved in what this is saying. In my sense. I mean, it seems to me it ought to be phrased in a way that that doesn't bring these god-awful monstrosities like Bellevue.
I'm not following you at all.
Because this is under a land use context. This is under the land use context.
It's a development decision for reduced traffic congestion. So you can have a development here and decide to reduce congestion by having these mega exit entrance things.
Well, I think what we've got here is a policy that we agree that we do want to, as we make land use decisions, we do want to be considerate of reducing traffic congestions, because we get a number of them in and we're like, what's a traffic study? And so it's really a policy decision that would be, and then the implementation of that would be where we get more into with the zoning and with the code and building as to what that starts to look like in some of those situations. But this is just a policy.
Safety net, I'm okay.
Okay, I think we're good. Number 8.
Promote the aesthetic appeal and beautification of the community through the quality expectations set within the city's code.
Is beautification defined somewhere? Because it's used twice on here, and it's pretty subjective.
It will be.
And again, that's similar language that we're pulling through from that adopted vision. Yeah.
Only life for that easy.
I remember that one coming out of the vision.
Yeah.
And really, in this context of talking about the city's code, it's especially landscaping, signage regulations, things like that.
Lighting. Okay.
So just for purposes of note-taking, so we asked for the definition of beautification, definition of walkability, and I think we asked for definition of integrity. Was that the other one?
Or lose that word is another option.
Yes, let's have a definition of integrity.
It's a massage of that policy.
Yeah, Ray, give us a definition. Just be a picture.
Do you want to go through the actions?
Yeah?
Okay.
Oxford English Dictionary.
So what do you want to,
Action 1.
okay. Our time might be better spent on moving to the policy conversation for the other sections.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that you may have noticed in the staff communication, and I'll just reiterate now, is our September 10th meeting is focused on the fiscal impact analysis that's been done relative to these plans, and then also the implementation pieces of the transportation master plan. So it may be, if we need to tackle those actions, I think that might be the better moment and conversation to really blend those things together. Obviously, the fiscal impact is going to be very telling about where priorities can be set, and so that might be the right context to have that conversation.
Okay, I think that's fair. So we'll go to page 46.
Page 46.
And do you want to set a little context for the housing and neighborhoods? And then we can jump into.
Yeah, and again, those key issues and considerations, exactly what we heard from the community. On the housing, there's been a legacy of past planning and work that's been done here at the city. So it really is building on the shoulders of that conversation. Obviously, affordability, attainability continue to be things that we've heard throughout those conversations. We've also heard a lot about people's desire to stay in the community, but their housing needs not being met with that transition. I think there are other things that you would point to. We've obviously looked a lot at the demographics. You've seen in the earlier sections of the comprehensive plan, where kind of that growth aspect fits into it, and just the changing demographics across the city. And then, I don't know if I would point to anything else. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think you hit it, everything from physical issues, design, to demographics, to affordability, economic issues. So.
Excellent. Goal 1.
A quantity and diversity of housing options that makes living in Littleton attainable for a wide range of age groups and income levels. appealing and affordable housing choices for young families wishing to access Littleton's reputable public school system.
I would suggest you could remove wishing to access Littleton's, appealing and affordable housing choices for young families. Carol?
I would suggest we could remove that goal entirely because it's included in goal number 1.
And again, the only reason for calling it out specifically was the school connection, because we heard that over and over and over. That's one of the top values that people add for this community. So just trying to draw attention to it.
I see, leave it.
Was the final word rule? I say take it out.
When I speak, it's pretty much fun.
Jason?
Just a quick word search, this is the only place that young is mentioned in this document. So maybe worth keeping something along those lines in the document somewhere.
Well, I think appealing and affordable housing choices for young families is the right thing to do. I appreciate Littleton Public Schools and the value it is to the community and all of that, but I don't know that it has to be part of, I feel a little concerned that we put huge focus on that in terms of our comp plan. I think we've just learned through a couple of adventures with the school district that they are a district in our community. They are autonomous from us on every single regard. So while we support them, and I agree with that, I think that just narrowing that goal to that group is not necessary. That they are part of that goal, but there are also a number of people that homeschool, there are people that go outside of, send their kids to Christian schools, other charter schools and stuff like that. So school children in Littleton are not all LPS.
Goal 1 covers it. Goal 1 covers it.
Yeah, Goal 1 does cover it.
Is there an intonation that in goal number 2 that the government will take over the responsibility of doing this? To me, it's somewhat of an overreach and an impossibility for government to do it.
I do want to keep this in here as far as the comment regarding Littleton Public Schools. I hear over and over again, a lot of the reasons people choose Littleton, come to Littleton, especially families, is for the school system. So to not acknowledge that, I don't think is accurate as far as the representation from our community. But I do agree that it's not just about the Littleton Public Schools. There's a lot of other schools that are attracting people to Littleton. So I'd welcome the opportunity to, not just specifically call out the public school system, but to say, access to schools and education and recreational opportunities in Littleton, because those are the primary reasons for coming. Young families are coming for schools.
Carol, last one.
I think with our recent experience with Littleton Public Schools in the last couple of weeks, that we can, for the first time, maybe ever, begin to envision where they are not our partner and ally, and that they may not in 20 years be an attractor. I'm not saying that that'll happen, but there's nothing to say that in 20 years it will be reputable or attractive.
Living document.
We don't know that.
Don't forget that you have a big chunk of the population that goes to Jeffco Public Schools.
I think
I'm okay with what you said.
maybe you guys can massage that a little bit. You've heard the different comments. I think we got a good idea of where we're headed. And we'll get a chance to check it again and overthink it again soon.
Nicely said.
Why is it a separate?
We're good at that. Overthink it. All right, goal 3.
Neighborhoods that are safe and comfortable for both new and long-term residents.
Sorry, just a little apple pie.
Bruce?
I think you can stop after comfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
done.
I agree. Do we all agree?
Sure.
Yes. Ooh,
About middle term residents.
middle term.
It's not for them.
Hey, you got agreement on that one.
Or call it all
All right,
residents.
let's keep it moving, keep it moving.
Right?
I
Karina?
wasn't sure where you were going with new versus long term.
I don't-
In-betweeners.
I get where they're going.
Oh, sorry, let's go on to the next one.
It goes back to welcoming in the vision statement.
Yeah.
So we're trying to connect all these dots, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Neighborhoods that maintain their character and integrity even as residents come and go over time and as owners reinvest in and upgrade their properties.
I appreciate this one. I reinvested in my property significantly, have the second mortgage to prove it. This does, I think it might be covered elsewhere, but it's a focus just on reinvestment and upgrading. There's no mention of changes. So begs the question of where are we putting the 6,550 additional housing units that we're going to need for population growth? But that might be covered under goal 1.
Karina?
I don't have a comment on the goal, I have a comment on the key issues and considerations. Can I bring that forward? That we didn't.
Let's finish goal 4. I like Jason's comment. I think, I know you guys are going with that. I wonder, sometimes I think, to kind of narrow it down so closely as to the types of folks, owners that reinvest, owners that upgrade. I don't know, maybe a way to just do a little broader stroke that gets the point across. All good?
Character, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Character comes and goes in a neighborhood. You've got straight zoning that allows a scrape off or an addition. You see it all the time in various older neighborhoods that some of them are well done, some of them are poorly done. But neighborhoods change. When you say maintain their character, it's like set in stone, and it doesn't happen unless you form a historic district or you have a special zoning area or what? Or an HOA. So it seems like we're forcing that neighborhood to stay when our code, zoning map doesn't say that in the rules and regulations.
I'm thinking where I lived when I first moved to Littleton and up near Broadless Park. That has, in one way, one sense, kept itself nice, but it also has changed because it tends to have, I think, higher ratio, diverse population. And I love it, because when I help with the back-to-school event, this is how I, and a couple other events, I see that and I see the change. And it's still a very nice neighborhood, but it's a little different than when I lived there. So we don't want to get things in stone, I think. We want to have safe, vibrant places, but we don't want to freeze them.
Do you use the word freeze?
Freeze.
Yeah, freeze, okay.
Freeze.
Got it.
Okay, good. I think that's good. Policies?
I have
One
a
last
list.
one.
Let's just finish the goal.
Karina,
Goal
we,
5.
no, we did finish the goal. Karina wants to go back to,
Issues and considerations.
And we do have one last goal.
Oh,
that's
all
what
right.
it's on the other page. I'm sorry, it's right there hiding on the other.
Flipping to page 47.
Yeah.
Goal number 5, housing that supports choice in mobility and investments in transportation infrastructure. Okay, and then back to issues and considerations.
So the one item here, needed and viable options to reduce homelessness in Littleton and surrounding communities. So when we look at homelessness, it's not just a factor of housing. It is also a factor of being able to be employed, being mentally healthy, etc. So to either just put this here, is suggesting that the only way to address homelessness is through housing. So I think this needs some thought about where it fits in this document. And maybe it fits in multiple places, or it's maybe how it's reworded for this particular section. So I don't have a suggestion other than just an observation on that. And one comment that, if we are going to talk about, reducing homelessness, we all know that the most successful approach is to be preemptive about homelessness. So preempt the occasion of it happening as opposed to trying to undo it. And so reduce to me feels like we're being reactive, and I think we should take the approach of being proactive. So preempt would be a word I'd be more comfortable with.
And I just want to, before we go on, I want to kind of repeat in the beginning, if we want to keep the conversation on goals and policy. So Karina, in an instance like that, jot down your notes and the questions that you have, and then just submit them, and then those will get circulated around, because those are good. And I think the homeless thing may be something that we could talk about quite a while in here, but we'll stay on. And that just keeps us on the goals. But definitely it's important stuff, and we need to have some input there. Carol, did you want to say?
I was just going to say that the official definition of homelessness is not having a home. Period.
Different reasons.
I was just saying, I hadn't thought of that. It's a good observation, though, doing the document search per Jason. This is the only place that the word homeless is mentioned in the document, too, so.
Onto the policies. Number 1, encourage an array of residential options within the city through both new development and redevelopment to respond to the need of varied housing types, sizes, and price points that are attainable for prospective owners and renters at all levels of income. 2, in cooperation with public and private partners, consider the entire spectrum of tools for assisting people in attaining their ownership and rental goals and methods for spurring and guiding the supply side of the market to pursue projects that will address local needs. 3, ensure that local development regulations and standards and related permitting processes do not unreasonably limit desired and compatible housing construction and renovation within the city.
Put that bold.
Yeah, I was just thinking, surround it, sometimes I think it's
Could we have a definition of unreasonably?
sure, write that up.
Don't be unreasonable, Carol. Well,
4, be receptive to mixed-use development proposals that include a residential component, especially where this will support retail viability and transit ridership, place residents near education and employment, local employment options, and provide affordable living options for seniors close to transit, parks, and shopping, medical, and other services.
Karina and then Robin.
It's like we need a button. Affordable living options for seniors close to transit. So why specific seniors? Wouldn't affordable living options for anyone close to transit be valuable?
Because we don't want old people driving on the roads. Have you ever seen Mark drive?
I'm just asking, was it intentional and deliberate?
But he's got to have the word seniors in
It's,
there.
it's something in community conversation that's come up pretty continually, especially for people that are looking to remain in the community, but have
I agree.
not found that their housing option currently is working for their lifestyle. And so that was just one of those themes that came up a lot through the conversation in the community. So we highlighted it because of that.
I would like to leave affordable living options close to transit, and it does not exclude seniors, but it also includes a lot of other populations that may have the same needs.
I agree with you.
Agreed. Jason, do we have another mention of seniors in the document?
Kyle might be able to beat me to it.
That being said, I think, Kathleen, one of the things that you have said repeatedly is that this is all input from the community. And so if you, in the input that you got back, hearing largely from part of our population about a specific type of need, then I do think it may go somewhere else, it may stand alone, it may whatever, but I do think it's important to call that out, and particularly because senior housing is very different than all other types of housing anymore. I mean, it's specific housing, it's age restricted, it's built specifically for an age group, and so it may be important because we've had a number of folks come along who have wanted to develop some age restricted or some senior type graduated housing options, and we've had some challenges with that. So I think it does deserve a call out. You may.
Well, and it may be that we look at how that blends back in on the action steps, but the policy stays broader.
Yeah, we don't want to be exclude others to the identifying of one, but I think it may be something that we do need to have as a call out.
Yeah, and with senior housing, as HUD requires or strongly encourages senior housing to be located near public housing. I mean, public transportation. And that is important for those folks because they don't have the options as other folks would have.
Robin, I'm sorry.
Just to point out, we talk about in here about the affordability, living options, but research shows mixed-use developments actually makes housing more expensive. So there's just something to think about where you're talking about trying to create affordability, but in a method that actually makes housing more expensive. This came out in the APA magazine, so there's like a disconnect with that to me.
Unless you require affordable units.
Yeah, it's just something to think of when you use mixed use and you add residential and mixed use places, that actually raises the cost of housing. That's all.
I think on the senior issue, if we just read the next policy issue, that might be the solution to our, if we just, take out senior from 4 and 5 talks about senior living.
That's a good way to keep it moving too, by the way, Kyle.
Well, maybe we're back to definitions, because not all seniors need assisted living.
Well, if we say support development of senior, assisted, and higher level facilities, just all in general, that,
You guys got all that? You can massage that. So given that, go ahead and read 5. I'm sorry, Bruce.
I was just going to ask, I don't want to get into wordsmithing, but the be receptive, if you got a use by right project, that can happen if they want it to happen. If it's a rezone, we're going to hear it if they file an application. So I guess I'm wondering if you're really trying to say encourage or support mixed-use development proposals, so forth and so on. I'm not sure what being receptive.
Maybe accepting? Accepting?
I'm okay with receptive policy 5.
Okay.
Just take all the comments, write them down,
And I did hear a slight change to 5, but I'll read it as is just to get us started in case there's anything else. Support development of more assisted living and higher level care facilities and other affordable residential options intended specifically for those hoping to age in place rather than leave Littleton during life transitions. And so the suggested change was to support development of senior, assisted living, and higher level care.
I think the important statement in that policy is age in place. So if senior is put in there, that covers that. We can take it out of 4 and be more inclusive in that statement in policy 4.
Karina.
A little bit to what Robin was saying in the previous comment. So here it says, and other affordable. When We know that higher level care facilities are actually not very affordable and they're very expensive. So I think we could just say, and affordable residential options as opposed to inferring that those other ones are affordable. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't.
Good, yes. They are sometimes.
I'm not sure that I want that at all. If it's a care facility and it's affordable, it's probably ugly as sin and it's going to fall down in 10 years. I mean, these are not cheap. We don't have too darn much space.
That's my point.
what she just said.
That's exactly my point.
I know, but let me finish. We don't have much space. I don't know that we need to put that in there when potentially people may age in place in their existing place. And transportation can come and pick them up and take them wherever the devil they want to go.
Okay, we're in trouble. We're in trouble.
It's time to move on.
Yeah. Can we write these questions down and submit them?
I'd like to
Maybe just take out.
I don't think it's a question. I think this is a discussion.
This is
I
a
agree.
discussion,
I
we have to move on.
I don't think it's saying it has, I think those are all commas, they're not saying it's, assisted living and affordable. It could be assisted living, it could be affordable, it's just having options for people to age in place. It could be in their own home, it's just having options.
Well, it says,
There-
and other
Agreed.
That's why she
affordable.
said take away other, and it just says.
She
if
just
they-
said
if-
take out other.
And then you can have, if a senior is looking for an affordable option, we can consider it. If they're considering staying in place, just consider it. So I think that covers.
So make a note,
Concerns.
Peggy, when we get the draft back, take a look at the revision and make sure you're gonna be okay with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Number 6, consider ways.
Continue, I kind of get bothered by keep saying, we're going to make Littleton so affordable that we won't need any rich people. Because everything, I mean, that's just the
Did we
thought.
say that?
Yeah.
It infers that.
It does, it's, hey, we're gonna make
Throughout
this.
the document.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
Everybody in here is going to get older and stay where they are.
I'm staying the same age.
And won't have any money to spend.
That's not
And
true.
won't have any city revenue.
It's not true that seniors don't have money.
So number 6, consider ways to extend the viable continuation of Littleton's 2 existing mobile manufactured home parks along Santa Fe Drive, Woolhurst near County Line Road, and Meadowood Village near Brewery Lane, as they provide a valuable and needed housing option.
We stayed very general throughout, but this is getting really specific.
specific.
We've got some those are two pretty valuable pieces of property, Meadowbrook and Woolhurst. They got the zoning, they've got everything necessary for a developer to come in and do something else.
And make it not so affordable housing.
Yes.
Mission accomplished. This is in there to spark this discussion
Yeah.
because it was requested very specifically
Put
to,
it-
it was mentioned even more specifically, protect those properties. Don't let those mobile homes go away. So,
By people that live there,
no,
by the rest of the community?
others. So it's that question of whether you get that specific in this document or.
There are lots of other properties that could get specific attention with a paragraph that aren't in here.
We can strike that.
In the context of all the housing challenges facing Littleton, this was called out as something that needs attention by certain people, so.
Sorry.
I raised my hand, go ahead.
I was gonna say, wouldn't just the general, having a diversity of housing type, sizes, price points, wouldn't this fall under that? It would.
I guess part of the question too is that these are private property, these are owned by someone, then they are renting, those that live there are either renting or have purchased their mobile home, but they do pay to have it on that land. And there is pretty rigid laws about how you need to, if you were to eliminate a mobile home park, that you need to relocate that. So they're nearly impossible to do that to. So I'm not sure what we're trying to do. I mean, the mobile home parks, both of them have always lived in a great deal of fear that that will happen. particularly because of Santa Fe and with the one, Meadowwood. But I don't know what we're trying to solve for here, except just putting that in here doesn't mean that that will not go away at some point. If somebody wanted to sell it and turn it into something else, we don't have authority over that. I don't.
The key word in there is viable to me. So consider ways, if at some point there's higher and best use and somebody wants to reuse that property.
Can't legally right now.
How about if we take out the very specifics of it, because could be other, just to say that we want to help preserve, communities, not these specifically, but consider ways to extend the viable continuation of mobile manufactured home communities, it should say, not parks, really. Because, it is very specific, and honestly, it should.
It's the only two.
Well, I think people could figure that out, though, can't they?
But we used to have a sod farm too. I mean, why didn't we say, let's keep our sod farm,
Well, I mean,
gotta go.
Let's let the market rule on this. I mean, it's.
Agree.
we can put this in here, but I question, what can we really do? I mean, what would be a viable, what could the city do for it to be viable? The only thing I can think of is to buy it.
That's it. There are ways to do it, so it's whether you want that to be a statement in your comprehensive plan.
Isn't 8 in a sense covering that, number 8?
It's about streets.
I think number one encourages.
Is there any opposition to removing
None.
Parks and Trails.
Not for me.
policy 6?
Strike it.
Okay. Do you have an opposition to that?
Jason, you want to keep it in?
Well, it's certainly it's a housing form that, ought to be recognized as an option in the community. And I think Sherry pointed out that there's a way to make it more general and not specific, to say that, as a community, we support this as an option. And I think
Maybe it can be rolled into another policy where you're talking about different housing options, okay?
Under affordable.
Okay. You guys, you get that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
So 7, adopt and apply development regulations and standards to ensure that new and redeveloped residential properties are consistent with the character of their surrounding area.
Kyle?
Consistent, I would prefer compatible, because consistent to me means like it's the same. And I would rather it should be compatible, if it's different, but as long as it fits the area rather than.
Everybody okay? Okay.
It's going to be an interesting new zoning code, because that's the only way you're going to enforce it. That battle's going to make this look like a walk in the park.
Compatible or consistent, or either word?
Just generally
policy
what we're
general.
trying to do here with this document. As far as compatibility, fits within, et cetera, how do you handle that in a dry zoning code ordinance?
Spices up the meetings.
But I think that's the value of the whole character mapping.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's going to be an interesting.
And we have things like that in our
Mark.
neighborhood plans already. I mean, we have stuff like that in our neighborhood plans already.
So I left this out of the opening presentation, but I was recalling today that in the 2014 SLIM comprehensive plan document, there was a statement in front of the policies that some policies will conflict.
I reserve the right to disagree with myself.
I think these are statements of principle.
That was a bromide. We weren't looking for anything specific.
Just keep going.
Okay,
All right, 8, support the quality and integrity of city neighborhoods by using public investments in streets, infrastructure, parks and trails, pedestrian bicycle safety measures, regular maintenance practices, and effective code compliance.
This is, to my mind, the most important paragraph in the entire 82 pages. This is what the city can do.
Exactly.
A lot of this pie in the sky, attainable, spurring and guiding the supply side, affordability. There's some stuff that the city's not king. The city doesn't have unlimited funds. This is something they can do. This will If we do this, this will spur people to come in, private people to come in, invest in older homes, fix them up, pop the top, add on to the back, whatever. That's what we need to do, and that's what will happen if we take care of the infrastructure.
Unless you go back to policy 7. I digress.
Regress with that.
Karina?
I just wanted to confirm regular maintenance practices of all of the above. It's not regular maintenance practices just for roads.
Bruce?
Yes.
You need to add snow removal.
Farmed by Keith Reister, personally.
You know I'm right.
Next.
9, ensure that residential developments near the next one. 10, monitor both background market trends and direct. Oh, sorry, I thought you said nothing.
No, I was
Ensure
anticipating.
that residential developments near parks, trails, and preserved open spaces capitalize on this proximity in terms of access and views while not overwhelming such resources with excessive or poorly designed access or other detrimental impacts.
Get rid of that last.
What?
Whatever.
We're insuring something, I guess.
So I have,
Karina?
this is so subjective. And we want to do this, but we want to do that. So it's a hard one to understand because it's so subjective. Like, what does proximity in terms of access and views while not overwhelming such resources? Maybe give me some examples, or maybe when a picture paints 1,000 words, it just feels like we want to capitalize and encourage development in these areas, but don't overwhelm it. So where does that balance tip?
Sure. What this would flow into potentially is standards in the probably subdivision as well as zoning, that if you have a property next to public park, public trail, river corridor, really the site design should be oriented toward that and to, quote, take advantage of that asset next door. But then as the South Platte Park planning talks about not having so many access points from an adjacent private property that you overwhelm that park space with people coming at it, so.
That's a great
managed access.
answer. Can we capture that as, like, would it be like maybe an action or something?
It's wording that helps us if we get into the zoning and subdivision discussions. It's guiding site design, that don't just do standard design when you're next to a river that you would have done 6 miles away.
So that's why I'm
This is
saying.
policy, this is the highest level of that, so
Right.
other stuff can drill
No,
down.
and that's what I'm saying. I think
What
you just explained might be an action item to say, develop specific standards around open space. And maybe it's there, but I
If it's
just.
not here, it's in the land use section or somewhere, because we have
Okay,
it in.
okay.
I just wanted to mention though, after hearing a lot of these things read out loud, I think the word ensure should go away. It might be one of those promote, encourage type ones.
Yes. Thank you. Kyle?
No, I was gonna say, how much would be lost from this with removing while not overwhelming such resources? If we just, encourage residential developments near parks, trails, preserve open space, capitalize on this proximity in terms of access and views. If you put the word maintain in there, I mean, I think the fact that we have access and views, overwhelming it would remove that access and view by definition. It's just that whole second fragment there kind of is hanging on the cliff to me.
And I would just say on this one that as long as there's some things further down, because this is at policy, but as long as there's some things that go further down, because an example is South Platte Park, an example is residential encroachment along the borders and boundaries of South Platte Park, and what does that do? Issues that we'll be dealing with because of rezoning in that area now or at some point. And combining it with the South Platte Park master plan that we have, combining it with the South Platte Working Group work that's been done, combining it with the east-west trails, those other amenities that we have that help to protect that area and not allow, because this says to me, this is really loosey-goosey in terms of that. So we can make sure that we've tightened that up further down so that we don't have a whole bunch of, 15 little social trails running down in through our wildlife area. I think that's, because I agree with the policy, but we really need to tighten up the screws as we get further deeper.
So we're trying not to compromise the integrity of our parks and open space. So maybe we need that statement in there.
Okay. 10.
10, monitor both background market trends and direct actions that could cause people to be priced out from areas where they have long lived to determine whether the city should consider actions to mitigate this effect.
So we're gonna monitor, but why, what are we gonna do with that?
That's my question.
Hey.
This doesn't belong, this at all.
Yeah. No, it should go.
Yeah.
How do you do it? Where's the money coming from? Where's your
It should
authority?
never be a policy.
Question on,
Okay.
where does Airbnbs fit into this policy?
Oh, Patrick.
Airbnbs.
Good
Oh,
one.
they don't.
Not housing.
We'll drill down further. Into code. They go into code.
Maintain character,
To ensure.
to ensure integrity.
All right, and we are moving then to infrastructure and services on page 53.
53?
Yes, we're going to spend much more time on that transportation chapter with a whole plan, so stay tuned.
Okay.
Goal number 1, well-maintained water, wastewater, and storm drainage infrastructure that serves the needs of Littleton residents and businesses while minimizing adverse impacts on the environment. 2, consistent budget and community support of a well-staffed, trained, and equipped police force to ensure a safe and secure city.
And that is what we're supposed to do anyway.
Yes.
It's a good goal.
A continuing.
But we're saying it's a goal, it's what we,
Yeah, but
that's one of our primary things that we should be doing.
Well,
That's why it's there.
exactly.
It ought to be the first thing on this page 1.
Just state the obvious. That's good.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A continuing commitment to periodic assessment and ongoing maintenance of public facilities that are essential to Littleton's livability and accommodation of visitors.
Ooh, I can see budget increase right there, Mark. Yep.
All right, on to policy 1. Commit to a robust program of capital improvements year to year as its financial means allow, while avoiding a deferred maintenance approach when resources are limited.
Did our city manager write this one?
He weren't the last one, I know that.
Comments were anonymous.
2,
What does "it's" refer to?
city. Sorry, I didn't read that first sentence. In making decisions that involve public resource allocation, regulatory matters, and physical improvements, among others, Littleton will.
Okay, so all these verbs go back up there.
Yes. So Littleton will remain an active and reliable partner in interlocal and interagency approaches to oversight and operation of essential infrastructure and public facilities and services, including South Platte Water Renewal Partners, Denver Water, and South Metro Fire and Rescue, among others. 3, link capital improvements, planning, and project prioritization. It's like big alliteration. To the city's economic development agenda and tax-based needs, especially where public infrastructure investments will leverage complementary private investment in support of this plan and other adopted city plans. Can I go back?
To 2?
We passed it.
Too late. Write it down.
Too late.
Mail it in.
Mother, may I?
Quick, like.
All right. So I know we say among others, so that can mean a lot. But we purposefully put South Platte Water Renewal, South Metro Fire, Denver Water. But the new renamed Urban Drainage and Flood is a really important partner that we actually talk about a lot in other sections, so I think it merits call.
And we, the Mile High Flood District.
Thank you.
Is called out as a potential partner, so that makes sense to pull that through that statement as well. Thanks. Okay, then we're on to number 4. Littleton will be prepared and resilient community, be a prepared and resilient community.
Read the bullets.
Ensure that city infrastructure, city-owned buildings, and public safety services can withstand and recover quickly from the effects of severe weather and natural hazards. Second bullet, ensure that growth and development are managed to reduce risk and recover from natural disasters.
I don't know how we can ensure against certain natural disasters. I mean, we might get wiped out big time, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it if that happens.
It actually says ensure to reduce the risk. So it's not like you're insuring it, but you're just ensuring that you look at the situation and reduce the risk if you can.
One of the ways might,
The first one doesn't say that.
Peggy, for example, one of the ways might be to have some sort of design limitations with respect to floodplain development. If you're talking about.
But I think it'd be better to phrase some of those things. I'm not prepared to do it right this second, but I think we could phrase it.
Send it on in.
I think those come in like in building code or development code or things like that. So I think
Those
from
would be
a policy level.
implementations that follow out of a policy.
Okay, we'll take
Yeah.
that. I have a comment on 4. So be prepared and resilient community. So the example, or the 2 bullets here specifically talk about infrastructure, but there's also services. So that I think it warrants a bullet, like what are the service that we provide during emergency response that we need to, maybe it's a program and initiative. But I just feel this is just infrastructure. And I think there are services that need to be resilient as well.
In the first bullet,
It's, so the policy is be a prepared and resilient community. So to me, there's 2 ways to do that. One, just how we are built or build, and then how we are prepared to provide service.
And so you're looking for more of a fleshed out of the public safety services that's mentioned in that
Maybe.
first?
Yep.
Okay.
The third bullet point that identifies that?
Yeah.
Okay, so 5, pursue multi-objective drainage design solutions where appropriate that integrate open space, recreational, and aesthetic considerations while maintaining public safety. 6, be a leader among Colorado cities in managing and maintaining public infrastructure and facilities, and in learning about and adopting best practices, green infrastructure, and new technologies.
I think we have a question back on policy 5.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say 6. I just
Oh,
want to
okay.
make a comment on 6 that I really liked it. I thought it was a great aspirational policy, something to be, very proactive and innovative. I just really appreciated that there. I thought that was good.
Okay, so we are now on page 57.
Can I comment on 6? Given the way our roads, some of our roads are going, I'm not sure we're going to be too much better because we get lots more stop paying employees in a couple of years. Because
We're going to talk about the revenue.
So I think to phrase it, I don't know right off how to phrase it, but we want to try to do certain things, but we can't have an absolute, it seems to me. So to the best that our resources allow, maintain public infrastructure and facilities. So we're not embarrassed.
No. And I think it's important to that point to just keep the context of a 20-year horizon. Because then, as we start to drill down into both that fiscal impact and those action steps, there's a step-by-step approach to doing that. But over a 20-year horizon, that is.
An awful lot of us are not going to be around in 20 years. We might not even be around in 10 years. And so I'd like us to have something that's kind of visible and achievable and then sustainable, which is the 20-year piece, right? But if we can't even do it within the next 3 years, it seems to me we ought to focus on something else. Maybe go back to dirt roads. I'm teasing.
Go ahead.
We good.
All right, so page 57, economy and tax base. I think this has been, in terms of those key issues and considerations, been part of the conversation around both your tables for a number of years, and just understanding the importance of the economy, our reliance on sales tax, sort of the general environment here in the community. We did hear from a variety of partners on issues that kind of related to this topic, and so based on those notes and kind of those conversations, there are these 5 goals, so I can launch right into them if there are no questions. Okay, so number 1, a focus on the tax base enhancement needs of Littleton City government to continue meeting the public service expectations of its residents, businesses, and institutions.
I don't know what this means, a focus on the tax base enhancement needs. What does tax base enhancement needs mean?
More revenue.
And how to get it.
Increasing revenue.
Let's not beat around the bush. Bingo.
So are we focusing on enhancing the tax base? Is that, we want to?
Yeah, I think that's what you're trying to capture there.
So can we just say increase?
Kind of a polite way of saying.
It works for me.
Well, not all the way, because it could be spurring more retail to come back, or some other ways that drive revenue. It's not just a tax increase.
Yeah, and that's why it's
There's other options for
Well,
it.
the enhancement needs is, I think, where I'm getting hung up too.
Like, I don't.
Maybe wordsmith that a little.
I just don't know what it means. Well, you can define it.
Tax base.
Let's have a definition.
2, continued nurturing of key employment sectors and target industries that expand local job opportunities and contribute to better incomes for those who live and or work in Littleton.
Back to economic gardening again?
Nationally renowned, right?
Right, we had that
Is that
conversation.
right? Goal number 3, revitalized commercial centers in areas that alleviate obsolete conditions and vacant sites and that meet the contemporary shopping and service needs of Littleton residents and visitors.
Take the D off of revitalize.
But we're not going to name any names.
That revitalized versus revitalized.
Yeah.
Continued provision.
Pardon me,
Oh, yes,
3?
please.
Who?
3.
Who does this?
You're going
This is-
to.
That's a
Us?
community goal.
It's a goal of the community. It's not saying we're doing this, it's just what we're doing.
Revitalize. Promote revitalization? It's kind of dangling there whether the city's going to take over something that it can't do, but
I don't,
aspiration to do?
You'll notice that in all the goal statements and the comprehensive plan, they don't start with a verb.
right, that's why I was gonna say, I don't think revitalized is the right word. Revitalized is the word.
And the point being, it's meant to be an end statement, it's what you're trying to get to. So
Sold, you sold.
it's not an action statement,
Okay,
not
got
a
it.
strategy.
Yes.
It's basically, if we're looking back in 30 years, we can check out, yes, that happened, not who did it.
Yeah, that's when we'll renew the comp plan again in 20 years. At this rate.
We won't be
5
driving
years.
there.
5 years.
Oh, is that what, okay.
Yeah.
What was best provision?
4, continued provision of resources and services that help businesses develop and grow.
Karina?
I think this is where my comment comes in because it's not to a specific goal. So I think we have to add to this something to the extent that regulation should not get in the way of doing all of this stuff. So we can promote business, we can promote commercial centers, but if then our development regulations, put up obstacles and walls, then this will never happen. So there has to be a tie-in to ensure that our regulation is supportive of this. And potentially it comes in goal 4, provision of resources, services, and business-friendly regulation.
Yeah, I think I hear you at that. 4 is more about just flowing through to what your economic development department does. That's what it's really supporting.
I know. And I don't think we should narrow ourselves like that.
It may not be a goal, it may be a policy.
Isn't it covered
In
in?
terms of a policy, in terms of saying, we will, support that.
My recommendation is continued provisions of resources, services, and regulations that help business develop and grow.
Was that different from what's there?
It adds regulation.
And I think the comment about maybe more policy level, it is covered at the policy level, so.
Okay.
Go ahead and just make a little note on that, we'll move into policy, and you guys, when you're redoing, you can mesh
Wait a minute,
that.
I don't get it, what adding regulation is going to do.
Well, it's a suggestion to do, we're gonna go down into policy, see where if it is applied in there, and then that'll.
So we're not adding it as a goal.
Okay, it's just, this, just.
Reevaluate.
Note.
And 5,
Just like, you got a hand up.
No one.
Okay, go ahead.
a commitment to education at all levels that meets the workforce needs of area businesses and ensures lifelong learning and skills acquisition opportunities for residents and visitors. Okay, we're moving into policies.
What are we doing? Educating people.
We're not. It's just a goal that we're committed to education.
And comprehensive plan is a community document, and that's why there's those partner lists. It's always the partners that help accomplish those things.
All right, in making decisions that involve public resource allocation, regulatory matters, and fiscal improvements, among others, Littleton will maintain city official and public awareness of the financial challenges the city faces in meeting the high and increasingly costly public service expectations of a largely residential community.
Can we get an amen?
Yeah.
I love to hear things you like, so thanks.
Fortunately, it's in there.
Yeah, 2, seek opportunities to enhance the city's tax base and diversify revenue sources in ways that are compatible and consistent with Littleton's unique character while also providing relief from the tax burden residents bear.
So there's the spell out of that goal statement.
Yeah.
Increase.
You talk about enhancing revenue sources, and then you say relief from the tax burden residents bear. Hello.
Where else does it come from?
Hotel, I mean, there's all those.
There's
revenue
always a
sources.
schmuck out there to nail, I guess, to increase.
Grants, I mean,
Sales tax
Okay, 3, assess the fiscal implications property by property when existing non-residential sites are proposed for residential use. And the bullet point there is recognize that some properties are no longer viable for commercial use and/or may provide more net benefit to the community by converting to residential development that brings added disposable income to support Littleton's retail sector.
So the planning commission should recognize this, the ones that attended that discussion, that meeting. Again, I think this is a good example of this is not set in stone that no properties can convert from commercial to residential, but assess it.
It's definitely something we look at whenever we get one of these that comes in. No, we absolutely have to.
And that sub-bullet point came from the planning commission discussion, just that there will be those cases.
And the previous page, bullet point, the tax base implications from conversion of existing commercial properties to residential use. That's the balancing, the hassle we're going through.
Karina?
I don't think we need this sub-bullet. I think the policy is assess the fiscal implications property by property when existing non-residential sites are proposed for residential use. So it's not just commercial for retail it could be industrial, it could be office space, especially when we think long-term 2040. I don't think this bullet is necessary, and then I actually think in some ways may limit it to that specific topic and that alone. I think the policy in and of itself states stop.
I thought the same until I had the discussion with the planning commission.
Oh,
We like it.
crazy planning commission.
Well, can't
Your vote,
So tell us the discussion.
Carol?
A problem here is that it assumes that disposable income will be spent in Littleton, and we can't guarantee that. We can't even massage that.
Maybe.
And before we supported that kind of perspective, I would want to see how much disposable income a person would have to spend to balance out our loss on commercial. Because we're talking a huge difference. That's
Kyle?
I would say I agree with Karina. I think that by itself is enough, and that sub-bullet point can be a part of a larger conversation. What is the economic impact of that? But I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I love that bullet point. I don't love the way it's worded, but I really like that it recognizes that truly underperforming commercial industrial office areas can be a drag on the community. You can go to, places on East Colfax to see, what that looks like. And if we're going to, mandate that those remain underperforming commercial, whatever, that could, hurt us as a community in the long run. But I do think there's some wording issues with this, talking about the disposable.
Disposable. That's that.
I don't think that sentiment is lost if that bullet point's not there.
I agree. There may be a few things from the bullet you can move up into the policy and find
We'll take another crack at that.
It adds clarity.
Yeah, okay. We'll get it back on the next draft.
Or this maybe falls within the economic, the other,
You're right.
like
Go
linked
right ahead.
plan somewhere.
You got 4?
And 4 is support and complete planning to better understand Littleton's economic position in the Denver region as both city and region evolve. The bullet under that, identify the strengths the city should capitalize on and which liabilities it needs to overcome, which industry sectors offer the best prospects for attracting new businesses, and what strategies will be most impactful as Littleton pursues its economic development objectives.
Sounds like an action. I mean, that's another one where it looks like just the original sentence covers it.
Five, continue to promote and work to retain its existing and distinctive local businesses. Bullet point, remain cognizant of how they can be affected by larger chain and franchise establishments and the changing retail environment.
Again, I don't know that we need the bullet.
6, consider all tools and strategies for reviving vacant and underutilized commercial properties before they deteriorate while building public consensus for determining which methods Littleton should pursue. Seven, periodically reassess the array of economic development tools, techniques, and financing methods available through federal agencies in the state of Colorado legislation and programs. The bullet point, determine which tools and techniques are appropriate for Littleton and are supported by city officials and the public.
Can we go back to 6 1 second?
No.
Yes. She said yes, I heard her. It seems like if we don't like the way our property looks, we're going to make you do what we want just because it has not what we want it to look like. It seems a little heavy-handed for some reason.
It says consider.
just says consider.
Yeah, we don't consider that. It just has that, I don't know, just, to me, I don't like the way it sounds. Go ahead.
Yep, so.
And 7, I mean, I don't see, again, the need for the bullet point. They're kind of saying almost the exact same thing.
I agree.
Sure that, I'm more, if there's a bullet point, why, if there's only one bullet point, why wasn't that the main point?
Yes.
I mean, if we have a bullet point, it should, if there's multiple points on a main heading, sure, we can have 2 or 3 bullet points. But if there's just one bullet point, how can we not combine them or get that sentiment all in just the policy by itself?
Yeah, that was the only discussion we were hoping to have tonight.
Yeah.
Now we've had it. Loving bullet points.
As opposed to what?
So I think the one comment in the bullet point is appropriate for Littleton, so that's important. So I think it's just, if you bring that up,
But what else
We just
would
put the
you do
word-
with it
What does that mean?
besides that?
And maybe say periodically reassess appropriate economic development. I mean, there's ways to make it more concise and more impactful
You guys will,
Yeah.
on every single bullet.
And then 8, which also has a bullet point, so monitor and adjust local government processes and activities that hinder desired development and redevelopment. Will it ensure that development proposals are consistent with adopted city policies and regulations and can be accommodated with adequate public infrastructure and services?
here's that policy you were looking for, that I was looking for.
Perfect.
There you go, solved.
Which means, do we need that goal statement? It's more addressed at the policy level?
Policy level.
Right.
Yeah.
But then does that policy tie back to the goal?
The policy doesn't
And
tie
then
back to
Because
the
it
goal.
doesn't. I don't know.
Well, that's a good
I
question.
think all the policies should have to tie back to the goal, so.
So maybe just make sure that.
We'll make sure that that reconciles back up. And then 9, foster a community of learning in which quality primary and secondary education, vocational and higher education, and lifelong continuing education are valued and accessible to Littleton residents.
Back on goal number 5, you guys sort of said something, acquisition opportunities for residents and visitors. I think certainly for residents, but I'm not sure what visitors, why visitors was.
It's getting at Arapahoe Community College, that how many people come here for education.
All right, so that's, then does it need to be on this one as well? You're right, it's a fair point, well presented.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
What do you mean by the education being accessible to residents? At least in terms of that statement.
I think between, especially Arapahoe Community College, but when the school district gets into continuing education at all, just that those types of programs are there. We heard that from the community of wanting to be able to gain skills beyond high school and college, throughout your life.
You're not talking about affordable, and you're not talking about being able to bike to the school. You're talking about having the ability to go to school or go to higher education you want.
I see this
Accessible.
as, there's a community college, there is going to be a vocational high school or a vocational arm, so we have different educational institutions, and we're going to support those educational institutions in our community. That's how I see it, as accessible. Other communities may not have many options.
Perhaps we need a statement about student debt.
I think it's okay in terms of the comp plan, because as you mentioned, the fact that it's a community document and the school is a stakeholder. I mean, at the end of the day, this body has nothing to do with any school in our community, including ACC. We can't even use our parking lot half the time. So to set us up with policy that would indicate that we have anything to do with any of that, I think is a little bit unfair and unrealistic. Recognizing that the people you spoke to in the community don't understand that. They don't know that the city, that the schools are so separated and that they don't know that. And as part of the community, it's something that they cherish, that they're interested in, they don't want to see go away, and they want to see us continue to support it. They don't want us to go in there and tell ACC to go somewhere else. So I get that. So we do need to have it in there, it does need to, but I worry a little bit about creating policies that put us in a position that, I mean, we can continue to foster a community of learning, I get it, but it's not super actionable in terms of what we can do with the schools.
That's why if I can address that one,
Yeah.
that's why it's one of those fuzzier words like foster.
Yeah.
It's just that it's in the economic development section of the plan, and to the extent that the city can help foster that situation by supporting community college bonds or whatever, whatever.
Yeah, and I think, today we hosted a stakeholder meeting at the Denver Seminary, so very similar in that they're in that educational vein, or you think about the Colorado Center for the Blind, also in that educational vein. So I think the intent there is much larger than the obvious partners.
I think as long as our verbiage is very clear about what that intent is, and you talked about, one of our initiatives was what do we call them?
Strategic imperatives.
Strategic imperatives was the partnerships, and this is really where that kind of also plays in. Carol, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just going to say that we have learned that if we wanted to affect the quality of primary and secondary education in the public schools, we could not do that as a city. We absolutely cannot do that.
We're trying to stay out of the actions level, but Action 12 speaks to what the mayor said, that all it talks about is partnerships, and that's it. That's all that flows from that foster statement.
Yeah, foster community learning with our educational partners. Just something generic and.
Or just support, maybe?
You guys work on that.
Yeah, really.
Okay.
That's another massage you get. Okay.
On to page 61.
61.
Recreation, heritage, and
If I may,
tourism.
if you need to get up and take a break or want to get some food, please feel free. Go outside and scream. Go outside and scream.
Apparently this room is very silent, so you can exit that door, scream, and we won't hear you. Recreation, heritage, and tourism. As you can imagine, we heard a lot about this over starting the conversation last spring in 2018. This is a huge piece to those value propositions for the community. We've also heard from other boards and commissions, particularly like Historical Preservation Board, about the importance of some of the additions that they would like to see, some of the considerations that they had. So this was a pretty broad conversation. You can kind of look through those issues and considerations. I mean, I don't think there's any surprises for you there, but that came up a lot through the conversation. So trying to, again, furiously take notes through all of that and kind of arrive at these series of goals and policies. So goal number 1, preserved and enhanced public green spaces that provide access to nature, widespread opportunities for recreation and play close to home, and continuous greenway connections within and through the city. 2, continued protection and promotion of Littleton's heritage, especially where it is tangibly visible in historic architecture, designated districts and landmarks, and distinctive neighborhoods and buildings. 3, a healthy community with convenient access to recreational facilities and programming, outdoor fitness activities, and quality nutrition options.
And quality nutritious options. Why does that become part of my recreation or heritage or tourism, unless we are promoting agricultural tourism, which is a thing.
Grocery stores.
Okay. And maybe it belongs here if you could give me some context of why, but it just felt out of place.
Hot topic in the planning world right now. Part of health, the healthy eating. These plans are done by committee, and it was something that was requested to be part of the document.
What committee?
The committee of the whole, 48,000 people.
What
Just,
as a goal though, what is our, what can we do about that?
that seems like more of how a person lives a healthy life.
I'll answer kind of that some other communities are having a big issue with, like dollar stores are actually forcing out grocery stores. They don't offer nutritious options. I don't think sorry, it fits here, but that's how a city would address that issue.
Does it open the floodgates to, hey, we don't want smoking? Where does it end?
We don't downtown.
We don't.
Is there a better place that could fit in the document somewhere?
And if I hadn't been reading aloud, it would have been one of those to cause discussion.
It's just a little awkward because it's a little awkward in so much as it is, and maybe it's more availability of, or something like that. I think we have our pea patches, maybe it's time, that those are great, keep those going. I don't know, but.
Okay, we'll relook at that
I
one.
think it's okay.
It's fine.
It's fine.
I see your point.
4, a vibrant city for both residents and visitors, enlivened by an active downtown, an array of cultural and entertainment options, both indoor and outdoor, and popular community events and festivals throughout the year. Okay, we're on to policy number 1. Littleton will maintain close and mutually beneficial relationships with the South Suburban Parks and Recreation District, Highline Canal Conservancy, Hudson Gardens, and other key partners that enable Littleton residents and visitors to enjoy a large quantity of high-quality recreational assets and public open space. 2, continue to build consensus on measures the city should consider and implement to bullet point 1, preserve more areas and structures with historic character, and bullet point 2, protect designated and potential new historic districts and landmarks.
I'm sorry, I have to go back to 1.
Right.
So again, we list some things but not others. So when you think of recreational assets, you may think of the museum, you may think of Town Hall Art Center. So how do we pick and choose which ones we're putting in
These
here?
are the relationships, these are like our partners, museum and library we own.
That's below though, right?
And it was thinking more in terms of physical recreation, not so much cultural things like that. It was more the parks and open space aspect.
Okay. 3, prioritize.
Go ahead.
I just have a comment on 2. I don't know what continue to build consensus really does as a policy. It just seems vague.
That was my comment
Continue
too.
to build consensus. Okay, let's just keep building and building and building.
Well,
What are we gonna do with that?
consensus around what?
Strike it, preservation.
So,
Take it out.
Remote measures.
Maybe just blend 1 and 2 bullet points.
And 3, prioritize public safety, including safe access to and from parks and other public spaces, and personal security while enjoying parks, trails, and community events. 4, incorporate guidance and incentives into the city's zoning and subdivision regulations that will achieve better design and integration of green and open spaces on private development sites with those nearby on public lands, and sensitive design approaches on sites with or adjacent to historic structures and areas.
I don't understand what that means. It seems like there's a lot of thoughts going on there.
Maybe we can simplify the language.
Maybe we need
but it's-
bullets.
And we're getting
At least 2.
It's parallel to that other one in the earlier section that was setting up for better site design and subdivision design. So simpler language.
It's a long sentence.
Okay, and 5, continue to plan for and budget adequate resources to maintain Bemis Library and Littleton Museum as premier public facilities for the enjoyment of both residents and visitors.
We cannot take that one out.
I just presented to both the library and museum board, and they agree.
Yeah. Karina?
Is a library a service or is it a recreation? So does it belong here or does it belong in infrastructure and services?
I like it here.
Because it's a resource.
I will say, just from the community conversation, it feels like it fits here more logically in
It's
how
part of that
people think about
heritage
it.
part of
It's
this.
an activity.
Recreation.
It is a gathering place as well as providing a service.
So in the intro to this section, there's, the last sentence talks about that the whole plan deals with livability, but this section in particular is about quality of life. So this is, and it was originally called recreation and amenities, and then it was made more specific to heritage and tourism. So that's the other thing, is everything we're talking about here, we gotta keep tourism in mind, that it's for visitors too.
6, regularly evaluate the appropriate and most effective methods the city can use for devoting resources and support to cultural arts and community events programming. 7, be sensitive to the perspective and needs of visitors to Littleton. Bullet point, develop awareness of the various ways visitors travel to and move about the community, how they experience popular locations and events, what they tell others about their experience, and what factors determine how much time and money they spend locally.
Should we add the sentence, and how to figure out how to part them from their money?
It seems like that
That'd be too
bullet
much.
is action.
Yeah.
It is.
It's 4 bullets.
And provide a place to park.
Oh, Carol.
Within 10 feet of where they're going.
Yeah, within 10 feet. Or less.
I think Karina has
So that statement to me triggers, is the definition of sense of place, because a sense of place is what you experience, both what you're seeing, what you're doing, what you're touching, what you're feeling. And I didn't catch sense of place anywhere in this document. So I think it's I don't know where it fits, but this particular statement actually talks about everything that we're talking about this section is creating a sense of place that is unique to Littleton, and maybe it's in the introduction. But I just wanted to call it out here because that's what you exactly described here was that creation.
Well, and I think that maybe we can figure out, there's a long history of having thought about gateways and recognizing when you were in Littleton. And so maybe there's some ways that we can kind of build on some of that previous work. Do that.
This number 7 touches my favorite issue, and that is getting people from downtown Littleton to know we have a library and an affiliate museum, a museum affiliated with the Smithsonian. I'd like they have an element in here that would be the transport piece, the circulator bus, or something or other that moves them around and gets them there.
That's an
Laura
action.
and I have talked about this. Or if they wind up there if they go there, getting them downtown to see our historic downtown and all the places they can spend money.
So what I like about that comment, so not specific of the how, but I think there is value to put a policy in place that maybe talks about creating connections between the various amenities and how to access them more easily or more frequently. So there may be room for a policy about accessibility of all those amenities and connectivity.
Isn't that what this does? I mean, it's specific to visitors here, but it's for how people, the needs of people that are in Littleton, awareness of how people travel and move about the community. That fits it right there.
I think this is a document that can be amended. But without knowing what those things are, creating a policy for it, I'm a little hesitant there. I think putting it in action, having information brought in, maybe it's also part of the transportation master plan because it's about more mobility than anything else. So there may be ways to loop that around, but we don't know. That's what I like about that last bullet, is that we don't know a lot of those things. And so we can't start making decisions about what to do without knowing. We tend, cart in front of the horse thing. This seems to put it back in proper position.
Okay.
That number 7 also might apply to residents. When we had the National Night Out get-together at the museum, there was someone who didn't know. He goes to the museum often, but he had no idea we were affiliated with the Smithsonian. So it's educating, facilitating for residents as well as visitors. Sure.
Yeah, just put in addition to residents, and that covers both.
That's an action for the museum to do.
Yeah,
Kyle, did you have a question?
I was just saying, if we be sensitive to perspectives and needs of visitors to Littleton and residents, as well as residents,
Interesting.
it covers them. It's a broad policy. We don't need to get into the action.
Being sensitive, I get hung up on sensitive, I guess. I'd rather be aware.
We know that you're not sensitive, so aware.
Well, exactly.
I like aware.
Aware.
Insensitive.
I like aware.
Remain insensitive to the needs of citizens and visitors.
If they don't like it, shove it.
Hey, is that your campaign?
Hey, that's right, I'll have to add that, yeah.
I'm the insensitive one.
But I am the aware one, I'm the aware.
I like aware.
All right, moving on to page 65.
If I could
Did you make note
backtrack.
of aware though?
The one time, I'm asking to backtrack.
Oh.
I want to go back to policy 2, and the comment was about it being vague, or where's that going? What we were trying to capture there, I've mentioned before that one thing that struck us throughout the conversations back to the vision phase last year was so many people talked about the history of Littleton, but they didn't talk about historic preservation, unprompted. So when we asked them about it, we heard the typical both sides of the coin. We don't need more regulation in historic districts, or we absolutely need more historic districts. We need to designate more. So that's kind of where this was going. And this policy is setting up what's in the actions. It's, I believe it's the final action in this section. Yes, the final one, number 17, which is to do an historic preservation plan. That's the vehicle to get to this consensus. Where are we going on historic preservation? What tools should we use? How many more districts should we designate? So that policy statement is fuzzy purposely.
That's what I was going to say is.
We have consensus?
Comments I wrote is that, our goal number 2 is very specific to that, and we only have one policy that kind of sort of alludes to that. And that was, if there was more structure to a policy that was more explicit about setting historic districts or historic preservation.
But that's kind of where we're going, is putting a strong goal, because that did resonate from people who are concerned about preserving the history, the legacy, the architecture, but then it's the how wasn't so much there. So the policy is work toward building that consensus. The action is do a historic preservation plan and process to have that community conversation.
Makes sense. Okay.
And then, as the mayor said, come back and amend that policy and make it stronger when there is hopefully a consensus.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, page 65, environment. I think we had a lot of conversation last year as we were working through the drafts on vision and guiding principles, that environment was something that didn't come up a lot, but is genuinely valued here in the community. And so it was pulling together a lot of those conversations to kind of understand how they relate directly to goals and policies. And so, again, pretty broad conversation, not too dissimilar from the emphasis on historic, but maybe not on the emphasis being on preservation, and start teasing those things out. So that first goal, appreciation of and respect for the land, air, and water resources within Littleton's jurisdiction.
How would we measure that? Did you laugh, Paul?
65.
Is it better
How do
than
we
it
know
is?
if we met this goal?
Better than today's? For me, it's a very broad one. It's just continue to increase that appreciation and respect. I mean, I'm not being facetious, it's a broad goal.
Is the appreciation of those resources important, or the quality of those resources? Is it one thing to, oh yeah, I appreciate clean air, but if we don't have it, that's a different.
I'm envisioning that commercial where that Indian with the tear coming down his eye.
Well, I think it's a valuable goal because we have a water treatment plant that we run that has to put water back in the river. We have storm sewage issues. We have a river that runs through our community that we need to take care of. We also have a massive amount of traffic like everybody else does, and we are a contributor to the poor air condition and air quality in the region.
That's goal 2.
Well, I'm just saying, because it says air.
I see one is mainly leading to education actions. It's awareness.
Absolutely, got to keep it.
No, I'm good with keeping it. I think it's about how do we rephrase it because it's not a measurable goal. How do you know if you achieved it?
All right. Yeah. And 2, recognition of Littleton's role in contributing to clean water and healthy air across the Denver metropolitan region.
This helps us get grant money, so let's keep that one.
That's right, for our sewer plant.
I think we need a little bit stronger word than recognition.
Okay.
Recognition of our role means we just recognize we have a role.
Commitment.
Yeah, but the goal would be to actually,
What about Littleton as a leader in?
Commitment of Littleton's role.
We'll look for a non-verb
Commitment.
that delivers on
Let's take a
that.
look at it.
that isn't insured, well, that's a verb.
Public education and tangible actions to ensure efficient use and conservation of Littleton's water resources. And then we're on to policies. So Littleton will, policy, oh yes.
Let's say, before we go to policies, I mean, I think the goals seem a little almost weak, just saying, yeah, we recognize or we appreciate it. I mean, we need to actually say, yeah, we need to have a clean and healthy environment. Not just appreciation of that, but actually need to maintain.
Goes back to what Karina was saying, how do we measure
Right.
it?
Well, if we take out the appreciation of it, just have respect, then
You
when
can-
we can see when people are respecting, I won't use words to describe the actions that are in my vision here. But if we just say respect for,
But respect for clean water and clean air is different than having clean air and clean water. I can have the dirtiest scum water pond I still respect clean water, but, do we want to live in a
demonstrate that you respect it.
And Kathleen said you're going to look at words for both 1 and 2.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is stronger and measurable is what you'd like to see in the rework of
I feel
this.
like we all really believe in this strongly, so we want it to be something we can say, we've accomplished it. We are a leader in the community.
We recognize our appreciation for this endeavor here.
And you'll see a very, it's a very lengthy partner list for this section too, that there is, that becomes very clear in the action steps as well.
Proposed edit to goal 3, start the sentence at efficient use.
That works.
That works. I actually feel as though there should be more goals. I think that without, getting tree huggery, but I think that there has to be a concerted effort, or at least start to have an awareness by cities that know I'm not going to do plastic bag. by cities and municipalities. I mean, we know that a lot of this stuff really does start at the local level. And so, the kind of things that the environment is dealing with, and they're just maybe a goal that is more encompassing of single use and, and I'm not saying that means we're gonna ban plastic bags or straws or whatever. Most of our restaurants have followed the straw thing, and maybe it's about supporting those. Maybe the city says that that one of our goals is to support private business where they're taking those efforts, and then there may be a way that we can assist. I don't even know, make it all up. But it feels like there needs to be something in there, another goal about.
And maybe we can work on how that connects to the other sections.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Okay. We ready for the policy conversation? So number 1, maintain as a core community priority the protection and enhancement of the South Platte River within Littleton. Bullet, this includes its water quality, the greenways and trails that frame and buffer it, the type and sensitive design of development that occurs in close proximity, and well-managed access for public enjoyment.
Love it.
Don't mess with it.
2, be a committed partner with state and regional agencies, organizations, and other area cities in planning and executing programs in public education that will improve regional air quality and satisfy Clean Air Act targets and requirements. 3, continue to be a leader in promoting and incentivizing wise water use, water-saving measures, and water conservation and reuse. Bullet, monitor Colorado's long-term water outlook together with the entire metropolitan area.
Action item.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, a question, going back, just thinking about number 1. We've had some pretty good leadership with respect to the South Platte Working Group, so it says within Littleton, but should we think in terms of regional leadership with respect to the river corridor, to, vis-a-vis our neighbors and so forth and so on?
I like that. So it's within the region.
Yep.
All right. 4, apply its stewardship ethic enthusiastically in collaboration with other public agencies, private interests, and the nonprofit sector to ensure that the city's public open space inventory remains a defining and well-managed facet of Littleton.
Comment.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit of what I was hearing when Debbie was talking about how do we encourage businesses and to kind of come on board with us. So here, though, we only limit it to public open spaces, but to me, this is something we'd want to do for our air, our land, our water, all of those, not just space.
Okay. 5, include habitat protection among its community planning considerations, recognizing that wildlife presence and movement within the city is a continuing reality and part of its appeal.
Say there that appeal is great, but it's also part of a healthy natural environment.
So 6, monitor all forms of noise pollution and ensure responsive methods for limiting and abating excessive noise levels, especially where it affects enjoyment of parks, trails, and public open space areas.
There goes the fireworks.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Monitor all forms of noise pollution, specifically or especially in those areas. What does that mean? What is considered noise pollution in those areas? I mean, it's a policy. How do we apply that policy? I mean, to me, it's
I thought
something
there was,
we
in
want to
general,
do.
I thought there was a wording you were pointing to.
No, I'm just,
Okay.
I'm kind of going big picture on it being a policy. I can tell you, I spend a lot of time on parks and trails, and while there may be occasionally noise that is not conducive to, white-tailed deer running across the trail, the noise is on the streets. The noise is the cars that have got some kind of weird thing on their mufflers, and the noise is the trucks that, the noise the trains, the noise that's affecting is not,
And
just tell me what kind of noise, because it's a policy.
Sure, and that was the conversation, just part of this city changing, and that it's not the way it used to be, noise is part of the issue. So yeah, you could lose that last phrase about trails and open space, just noise.
Noise pollution, yeah, it's, even if it's in your neighborhood,
Yeah.
I got a concern with the word monitor, because again, that's an action, whereas it could be something, reduce. I mean, if it's a goal, reduced noise or please.
End.
Yes.
Eliminate. Time.
This might be better for the end of this policy discussion, but I'm gonna put it in right now. We talk about noise pollution, I don't see anything about light pollution in here either. I think we should have some kind of policy about light pollution.
First time we've heard that topic, that's why. Meredith?
Really?
Yeah.
Never heard that. And that's a great point.
Oh. That's interesting.
Year one.
There, open.
Well, the focus in this is on excessive noise levels, so that's important. And of course, I won't name names, but someone at Carson Nature Center always names me, because I get to hear the concerts, the way the sound comes up and then bounces right down on my house. So I don't have to pay to go to the concerts. But what we're looking at, I think, is the ability to enjoy the space we're in. And so if a souped-up hot rod, really souped up when it comes down the street while you're enjoying wherever you are, we'd like to reduce that in some way. If somebody is shooting off fireworks, I'm not objecting to fireworks, but certainly some people got upset about the fireworks. Is that something that we want to do, or just recognize that that's an acceptable exception?
We do have more.
This is exactly where this policy will lead us straight into those code changes that we're going to need to look at. We need to look at our lighting ordinance, we need to look at our noise ordinance, and then we can refer back to our comp plan and say, this is what we ratified our code, we agreed to this policy. So those are exactly what should trail down out.
Yeah, because we have a noise ordinance and light ordinance.
But that's why it's important that we get this policy right. Yeah, but they're old and they need to be tweaked.
Yeah.
But that's why getting this policy right, so that we're not, the policy, when we're in there doing the code and we go back to the policy to look at it and all it says is monitor. I mean, the policy is manage it,
And ensure responsive methods for limiting, that's the continuation. And
So
abate.
whatever, there just needs to be teeth there.
Manage is the word I wrote down.
But what's excessive to one person is mild to somebody else, so it's a sticky wicket of sorts.
Okay.
We'll rework that one. 7, continue to explore viable and cost-effective ways to assist Littleton residents and businesses in reducing their solid waste generation and to offer expanded recycling options.
Loose is trash, we're talking trash.
We're talking trash.
8, consider reasonable and equitable means for protecting front range views when evaluating proposals for new development and redevelopment.
Yes.
And 9,
Can I ask the city attorney?
Yes, go ahead.
Reed, wake up.
He's been making all kinds of good comments.
He's killing it at Tetris. So there's different conflicting opinions about whether views can be protected or not. And so what I worry about on that is creating a policy and then we're working on a rezone and we decide that it's a view affected. And so we're gonna make a decision about a rezone, but are view corridors protected? Can they be protected? Should we protect some? We've got the library to the museum, which I don't, or the Carnegie Library to the courthouse. Oh, I got that one wrong. City-owned buildings city-owned buildings for 200. Yeah, so where does that?
Help her out.
For the most part, that's going to be a matter between, it's a civil matter, it's a private matter between whoever's purchased that property and whether or not they ensured that they had a view corridor when they purchased it with that developer. So to bind another property owner to preserve the rights of an existing property owner in which that person never had an easement, if you will, or a view corridor, I think that gets a little too deep into a private matter rather than policy.
So could it be, but you're saying it can be an easement, so can we put in an easement, like a view easement of sorts?
We wouldn't be able to do that. That would be something that the private property owner would have when they were building their property, when they purchased their property. From the neighboring parcel, that would be the one who would be most impacted their view of how they decided to build.
Private agreement, so.
There's one,
Yeah, because
but there's a view corridor easement on Melting Pot, which used to be a city building. And it was created when the building was sold.
but that was with the property.
Quite so, yeah, exactly.
And I don't think, I mean, I just look at that as a policy thing, and that puts us in a position when we are really dealing with that as a rezone, because that's when it's gonna come up, that if we just make a policy, we really can't do anything about it.
So if I can
Mark.
speak to it, well, go ahead, Mark.
No, when my house was built, it blocked somebody's view behind me. The guy across the street is blocking my view. It's always the last development in any area that is the boogeyman, the bad guy, that's blocking everybody's view. So never buy the last piece of undeveloped property in any neighborhood. So this right to a view, as I mentioned before we started tonight, has crept in at least 3 or 4 other times within this document. I said tread very, very lightly, if at all, into this realm. There are legal issues galore here.
I agree.
And
Eliminate.
I don't know how you enforce it in a city that's built out.
Yeah, and the geography of Littleton, there are areas where the view is incredible. You can go 1 block over and there's no view. So just the geography alone is kind of what defines that, and to try to say that we're gonna protect, I don't know. I think it's.
You can sort of get into it when you start talking about, heights of buildings, and putting restrictions on that in certain areas that, in this particular area, nothing's gonna be above, 3 stories or 35 feet. That's one way that you can somewhat protect.
Maybe we could define that a little better.
One instance where the view came in was Littleton Hospital, when they expanded that last big tower they put in. They needed some zoning considerations, rezoning, and it was one of the negotiation points with the neighborhood that wanted a certain separation so they could move past that tower at Littleton Adventist.
So maybe.
It can happen, but
Take a look at it.
it's a negotiating point when you get into a rezoning.
Oh, Gary.
So to wrap it up, the reason this statement is in there, we heard people talk about mountain views frequently. So the wording is consider. And what it leads to is, are there any ways? So one option is don't go there, as some people are saying, take it out. The other option is the reason it's there is you're heading into this zoning and code update effort. Have the conversation. If there's no reasonable and equitable means to do it, take it out of the plan. So that's the intent of the statement.
All right.
Have the conversation. If there's not a way to do it, it goes away.
And then that final policy.
But it's addressing the concern that was out there that.
I understand, and I get, and I think that's exactly what we want to do, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to set the council up to fail because the community has a concern about protecting views and we have no rights or no jurisdiction over views. I get what Reed's saying in those instances. That's typically, we're not talking about building a 4-story building at their home.
But what I would argue for is the value of having that conversation to say the city shouldn't go there. And then don't let your comp plan sit for 20 years, take it out next year.
And is it only buildings? Is it, hey, a tree is blocking my view of the mountains right now. I'd like my neighbor to cut the damn thing down. Go fish.
So like I say, it could go away completely from this draft, or it's a consider statement. Consider if there's ways to do it, if not.
Exactly.
So consider that, right?
Consider that.
And then that final policy, encourage energy efficient and other green building practices, including adaptive reuse whenever possible. All right. Then we are in special areas in design and the final discussion, pages 70 and 71.
By the way, this is my favorite section. I thought this is kind of a catch-all, and it covers a lot of things not covered.
And a direct result of a lot of conversations and what people really find to be sort of the unique aspects of what they love here. So that first goal, a downtown that continues to serve the entire community as a civic, historic, cultural, and economic focal point while becoming even more welcoming and accessible for residents and visitors. 2, a future Littleton Boulevard that accommodates
Sorry,
more.
I'm gonna stop.
Ooh, stop.
A downtown continues to serve the entire community as a civic, historic, cultural, national, while becoming even more welcoming. Why do we even need that last piece? Can we just stop at point? A downtown that continues to serve the entire community as a civic, historic, cultural, and economic focal point.
Working, that's what it's about.
Accessibility.
It's about what?
Parking.
Oh.
Can we make it a separate goal?
But I'm fine with dropping that as you suggest, but that's what it was about, that last phrase.
It's not clear that that's what it's about at all.
And I don't know that I want that as a goal.
And it's to set up, one of the action items is to do a downtown.
All right.
I'll table and come back to it after I look at it.
Yeah, I don't want to be, I'm not being facetious with some of my responses, but it's responding to people who said, I don't go there anymore. Residents included, and then if visitors are saying, well, it's not an easy place to get to and park. So that's what that was responding to.
10-foot rule.
Okay.
So, 2, a future Littleton Boulevard that accommodates more community-serving businesses and nearby attainable housing options amid a walkable setting of authentic neighborhoods and historic architecture.
What's a community-serving business?
Local, look at,
Yeah. Or neighborhood. 3, an ecologically sound and exceptionally attractive South Platte River corridor framed by sensitively planned land uses that continue to anchor the entire community's trail and open space networks.
I don't.
Say it louder.
We have a thing called the community trail, so I think I would find a different word there, so it doesn't
Okay.
get confusing.
And then 4, roadway corridors that fulfill their primary transportation functions for drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit while advancing the community's in economic development, housing, and aesthetic interests.
We are something.
That's yours.
All right. Keith.
Okay.
Okay.
Policy.
Policy number 1, Amid the many competing priorities of municipal government, pursue new special area planning efforts only where there is commitment, including committed funding and other resources, to follow through on the resulting action agenda.
Who wrote that?
Exclamation point, Some of these conversations were interviews, right?
Mark, you should have put something in here about 4 votes.
I was gonna say, can I get an amen to that?
We'll admit to that one, that's some consultant preaching right there.
To evaluate investment and revitalization opportunities in special planning areas, always with an eye toward Littleton's guiding principles of being anchored, authentic, connected, active, and engaged, and the community character framework established in the land use and community character section.
Hey, Mark, you know what's not in there? Small town vernacular.
Rural vernacular?
No, we always had small town feel or whatever.
Yeah, small town.
Yeah, we don't, it's
Are we
no
a small
longer.
town?
No, no.
3, emphasize quality urban design and cultivation of a positive community image for Littleton in all special area investments involving both the public and private realms.
What's a positive community image?
It's the opposite of a negative community. Perhaps.
I want to.
Anything else I can help you with?
What is?
That was literally what Gary was going to say too.
Right.
You
What's
don't
a
know what it is
special
either?
area?
The opposite of
Four areas.
Nobody
Areas
knows.
that are identified as special areas.
I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to,
I mean, it's all about image and branding.
oh, some branding, okay.
I'm not sure what the emphasizing quality urban design,
And
does
again,
that and how, and
this flows from people who talked about, and people have said, we talked to non-residents through the vision process as well. People who said, yeah, Littleton's just not quite what it used to be in terms of cleanliness, or it's starting to look old, it's starting to look tired, so that's what that's from.
Go for it.
Go to Stapleton if you want to.
That was an insensitive comment.
So 4, foster continuing community dialogue when special area planning efforts highlight divergence between market factors that drive private real estate decisions relative to community desires for influencing land use outcomes and development design.
We've been there.
5, for areas within 1/2 mile of a rail transit station, promote development designs that prioritize the pedestrian and include transit supporting uses and intensities.
Wasn't that our TIZ?
Wasn't that one?
TIZ.
Our TIZ zone we used to have.
Transit impact zone.
Yep.
Get away with it.
My comment on this was when we did the mineral framework, the community was very concerned about the intensity because of the river. So I'm not sure how that would play into this, but the framework does talk about this.
Okay.
So I'm not, where are we on this one?
what
Five.
are transit supporting uses?
Yeah.
So the note I have is we need to make sure that it is in sync with that plan.
Okay.
Yes, because there was a lot of conversation about the intensity. They didn't want intensity because it was too close to the river. Because we had, had discussions about doing TOD there, and that developed into the mineral framework, which showed that the community was very concerned about that.
So transit supporting use must also include a huge amount of parking. And they don't want a huge amount of parking close to the river and so forth, right?
It's the concerns with the river that people had, yes.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
I guess,
Yeah, go ahead.
please.
No, I was just gonna say, we'll look at that and get that better synced up.
I'm having a bit of a disconnect on 4 when you talk about community dialogue where planning efforts diverge between market factors that drive private real estate decisions relative to community desires. I mean, if somebody wants to do a use by right project on a given parcel, there's not a lot of community dialogue there.
Tough cookies.
I'm not sure what, if you're talking about land use planning, which is, if future land use planning, okay, sure, fine, that's what we're doing. But if somebody, the way this, if somebody's got a use by right project, they're not coming in for a planning commission review, they're basically working, you know, with staff on a building and so forth and so on.
I hear you, Bruce, and what I was thinking about is this more on the planning side before zoning.
Okay.
Discussion. This carefully worded statement is all about the lack of consensus in the mineral station area and other areas of level of development to allow it.
Karina?
And what I think this also does is, while there is no, public input because it's used by right, there could be an, more just outreach and education earlier on, not unlike the reason we do P4. So P4, could fall under this to say, this is, increased dialogue that we're doing between council and a developer. So it just creates more opportunity for dialogue.
I think that's,
Even if nothing can be done, I think it's just, sometimes a lot of that is about just engaging.
well, I don't disagree with that, but I mean, the P4 process involves a land use change. And if what we're saying is we want to identify key parcels and approach property owners in advance of any development occurring, that constitutes the planning process.
I think a good example of this, as Robin referenced, was maybe earlier special area planning for the mineral vicinity.
Yeah.
That didn't go well, as I understand, and that led to continuing discussion that got to the framework, trying to find where's that middle ground. So I think that's what this is trying to get at. It's not about zoning, it's when special area planning is done.
Okay.
And if there's a disconnect between, well, this is what we want, we the community. An example, I've heard people say there should just be some single-family detached homes and maybe an ice cream shop at Merrill and Santa Fe. Show me the developer that's gonna do that viably.
Right.
I think it needs to be rewritten. I think it's too long. I think it goes to places where it shouldn't go. I get where you're trying to go with it, but to me, I read it like a rezone. And again, I think setting us up to fail. We cannot have dynamic community dialogue when we're dealing with a rezone. It's one of the ugly natures of that beast, that we are sequestered from that, essentially. And so I think if the intent is that early opportunity during city planning exercises for master plans and those types of things, that I think is more, that's a policy we can live up to, but.
That's what it says.
Special area
That's-
planning.
So I guess we need to tweak the wording because it wasn't read that way.
Right.
Right, yeah. Well, and I think it's that commitment to the engagement piece, right?
Rich.
You have clearly made a huge priority through this process, and so I think just building on that with.
Well, if the idea is fostering community dialogue, when special area planning efforts are, I mean, the rest of it is what's confusing them. When market factors drive private real estate, I mean, that's when we're in the minutia of that. That's not when we're talking about our master plan. Our master plan is get out your box of crayons and let's, that's the special area stuff, working on that. And that's why the mineral thing, I mean, it wasn't a developer that, well, kind of was, but, but it wasn't, but I think think it just needs to be tightened up a bit.
Yeah.
Or go away.
They got the message. Go do it.
It was an attempt by us to capture this
I think.
lack of consensus.
I think it'd be, I think it's good to be there. I think it should be there, but I think we just maybe have to.
There's some planarese in this sentence. It's hard to digest. I've tried to read it 5 times. I'm now starting to get it. But it needs to be simplified. Broke it up into 2 sentences, whatever.
Okay. We can do that.
Yeah.
No, not us, you. It's
And then,
planarese.
so then we're on to, oh, yeah.
City manager has a comment on 5.
I just want to make a comment on 5. It's specifically written there for rail transit station, for areas within 1/2 mile of a rail transit station. But I think it's also important to recognize that we have being considered. So I think it's applicable, that statement probably to BRT as well.
So maybe just eliminate rail and put transit station.
Something.
Okay.
6.
Yeah.
Opportunities to engage public, private, and nonprofit partners in special area planning and implementation efforts as appropriate, to leverage local funds with other resources, and to explore ways to advance shared interests and multiple objectives through joint initiatives. And then the last 7, stay active in regional planning processes and decision-making forums with implications for special planning areas identified within Littleton.
Sounds good.
Just for consistency's sake, throughout the different sections, I see why you didn't do it, but the goals and the policies had acronyms in the other previous sections. And
Yes, I
it
just
would
realized.
be a very sad acronym here, but
Yep, just saw that we missed it in this section.
Sad, yeah.
Funny.
Is that an acronym for mission?
But it'll be SA and D.
Okay, there you go.
So you'll have to work really hard to get there. Okay, so that was the conversation we had for the comprehensive plan. What's the pleasure, right?
Okay, well, we're at 10 after 9, and we have another issue. Council does.
We do, yeah, after this here.
So we've got to have a conversation. So I guess unless there's a huge concern that we should start the plan, run through about 10 minutes of it and then adjourn. Or just do the transportation master plan on Monday. We start fresh one.
Yeah.
Good with that, Mark? Everybody
I think
okay
fresh
with
is
that?
good. Fresh is good.
Yep.
Okay. It just goes without saying that it's just so obvious the amount of work that's gone into this. And I love the way that Gary is here now, a number of months later, defending the public.
That's a good point.
But it shows how invested you've become in this whole thing and how important it is to you. And I almost think you know Littleton better than most of us at this point. But it really is amazing. And that was a lot of heavy lifting. And that was a lot of policy.
I'm gonna be gone Monday night, unfortunately.
Okay, but we got through that policy with 2 boards without, we drilled into a number of things, but I think it just speaks to the quality of work you're doing, the level of depth and detail that you're getting into, and then how you're able to put all that into a document like this it's really a stunning document, and I'm really appreciative. I'm so proud of this. Actually, when I was reading the very front pages, because I just love reading those early pages, I tear up because it is so cool. It really is. It really is.
Well, and just to echo that, what is so incredibly obvious is the incredible passion and love for this place that this community has. And so it is such a pleasure to be able to take all of that conversation and try and sketch that out as to, here's what we heard. And now to have this public comment period that stays open until September 16th, I think to both encourage people to say, what do you like in this plan, but also, where are you not seeing yourself? And so I think that's what we hope to hear through this process as well, is that we hope to hear a lot about, I see my conversation, I see my input, But, when we didn't capture it all, then they also let us know that
Does
too.
public comment become public, so we can see all the public comments?
Yeah, we're gonna try and figure out a way to synthesize all of that. We've encouraged a lot of the boards and commissions here at the city to draft their comments into a consensus building memo. So we hope to share that for other key partners and those that submit comment. Our hope is that we can kind of show you the lump sum of that. So to remind you of next steps,
Well, don't make it hope, make it so, I guess. When we were dealing with the light rail station a few years back, remember, we had 100 pages of public comment. Waded right through them. I mean, it was page after page.
Yeah. And so.
Just verbatim what the public said.
Right, exactly. So the hope, I hope is that we can present it to you in a way that you can get through it and see some of the commonality. But no, definitely.
Categorize them,
Yeah.
yes, please.
And particularly because it's both plans, but just to kind of remind you of a couple of additional tools that we have in place for people to kind of dig in on both the plans. August 28th, we have a telephone town hall, 6 to 7:30. We're encouraging people to go ahead and register online, littletontownhall.org, as well as do that outreach component. Those have been successful tools for us, but we'll kind of wade into the document and receive lots of questions and have sort of a Q&A on that. September 12th will be our final speaker series, Peter Kajiyama. Again, for a few of you have heard me say, right, his whole premise is, why would you make a city livable when you could make it lovable? But I think the most important component of his work is really the essence of being co-creators. That everyone has a role to play and everyone is accountable for how this city evolves and moves forward. And so how do you combine all of those roles? Now to remind you, so on Monday we'll tackle the Transportation Master Plan. On September 10th, we'll be looking at the fiscal impact as well as that implementation plan. So once you get through the TMP, that policy conversation, then what we'll be bringing you is sort of a menu of, what would that mean in terms of the types of things that you could do. And then the work to prioritize that will probably be work beyond this process and very much involve the Transportation Mobility Board, because that will impact the 2021 budget. And then October 8th, we'll come back to you with that public comment, as well as sort of a final review of any changes that have been made to both of those documents, similar to how we did that with the vision last year, and just kind of walk you through. Our hope is always that we get a lot of input, and so the documents that you're looking at, that you see all of that starting to pull through in that final document. And then we're looking at October 14, 15 for both recommendation and adoption. So we're in the thick of it. This public comment period is a very real and active process, so I encourage you to take part in that. I encourage you to encourage others to take part of that, and we will continue to do that in terms of our community outreach.
Thank you. Karina?
When is our budget meeting? Isn't that September 7th?
Yes.
Correct.
And this is afterwards?
This will impact implementation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is any of that's going to play into the budget? We're talking about our budget before this?
You will see placeholders in the proposed budget for 2020 that may look at other planning efforts, some of which we kind of touched on here briefly as policy. So, for example, possibly downtown. So that will be in the proposed budget. You'll see it.
And the budget meeting is September 7th.
Right. So that's why I'm saying it was before this.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, yes, it is.
Full day Saturday.
Excited all day.
Carol?
For October 14th and 15th is that separate meetings for Planning Commission and Council. We're not obligated for both.
That's correct.
You're going to be our representative.
So, at our council meeting, at the planning board meeting that night, planning commission meeting that night, and the council meeting the next night, it will be under general business because we will adopt it by resolution.
Assuming planning recommended it.
So it will be the adoption of the comprehensive plan.
Regardless of their recommendation.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take 5 minutes to let folks who aren't interested in our next one. This should take about 10 minutes.
On this, yeah, I think so.
Okay, who's gonna take this? So,
I discussed it at second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. Okay. And then I'm gonna take up stuff. Oh, all right. So we really have two things. One is, this is really a cleanup, of our code that we have to do. And it's kind of something we stumbled across and said, oh, that goes high up on the to-do list. So, have a quick presentation about what this is and why this is important and why we need to take care of it. So, Mike?
Thank you, Mayor.
Or Jennifer? Mike?
Yeah, I can run through it fast. You know, if you were impressed by the creation of the comprehensive plan, your socks are gonna be knocked off by the creation of enabling legislation. So, right now, and at the study session, no formal action is necessary. The question is, should we proceed with it? And we can talk about the proposed amendment. The current code defines the comprehensive plan and adequately ties the review processes to comprehensive plan review. However, there's no process for the creation, revision, and adoption of the comprehensive plan.
Say what?
Hence why we are here.
Yes. So, we've got a proposed amendment that was included in your packet. And it basically enables the council to cause or amend in whole or in part the comprehensive plan. There are built-in public hearings, at least one at Planning Commission and at least one at City Council. So the Planning Commission would be a recommendation to City Council on whether to approve or not approve or whatever, approve with conditions, the comprehensive plan or one of its parts. And then council would make a final decision based on a resolution. Also, we included in there a part for citizens to request amendments to the land use and character map, just in case we all miss the mark on a particular property. They're able to have some sort of direct application to change that land use map.
And it was, citizens would be allowed to just change the map, not necessarily policies. That would be up to Planning Commission, City Council.
Can we go back to
Well, the
that?
citizens would not be changing the map, they would be bringing that recommendation to us.
It would be an application and a request, and that would go through the public, the same public hearing process, through Planning Commission for recommendation and to council for a final decision. Sorry, I should have made that clearer.
Really, don't do that again, okay?
Hey, you're spoiling my time here. Let's see. So, in conclusion, our recommendation is to move forward with the, concurrently with the comprehensive plan. I made a little mistake in our memo here. So to do the code amendment, we need 2 readings. One would be the first reading, which is just sets the agenda for the second, or sets the date for the public hearing. So we would actually recommend to go to Planning Commission on September 9th for this code amendment, and then October 1st for the first reading at City Council, October 15th, concurrent with the comprehensive plan for the second reading. I've talked with Reed, there is a 7-day effective period for the, if you were to adopt the enabling legislation, it should affect adopting a comprehensive plan on that date.
Go ahead.
Is it that we can't do this sooner, like we've run out of time to do this sooner? I just.
Yeah, publication, getting it to planning commission and 2 readings of city council, we've kind of run out of time a little bit. And with the goal of discussing the comprehensive plan on the 15th, that's the main goal, and to do the enabling legislation before that would be helpful, but I don't think, anything would necessarily prevent city council from adopting a comprehensive plan, whether we had enabling legislation or not, but I think it's a good practice to have it there.
When would planning have its second reading?
So planning only does one public hearing for a code change.
Oh, okay.
And that would be September 9th.
So my question would be, I am a little scared cutting in that close. I mean, I don't think anything will happen, but, so I'm just wondering if we could have council have a first reading on the 3rd, planning sees it on the 9th, we do our second reading on the 17th, September.
I'm more comfortable with that.
That works for you too? Sure.
I was gonna ask Reed too, isn't there a possibility of waiving or, having an emergency meeting by having a supermajority to waive the need for having 2 hearings? Isn't that?
Emergency ordinance.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not familiar with emergency ordinance language for that.
Yeah, emergency ordinance.
I will say, I don't think that you necessarily need to have this adopted in order to adopt a comp plan. So
I know,
the enabling legislation is really more of a guide on how this is going to be done in the future and the ways it's going to be done and who can petition to have certain things changed, what things can be changed within the actual comprehensive plan when city council asks staff to take a look at it as in particular sections at a time. That's what this enabling legislation really does.
But if we can get it on the 3rd, 9th, and 17th, if that is possible, that staff could make sure that that could be done. And that's not a problem. I don't want to overburden you guys.
Yeah, because we're sensitive.
We're sensitive to that.
That was one of those policies, I know.
But if we could take a look at that, if that doesn't work, then we have Plan B.
Certainly.
Okay, council, is that okay?
Works, yeah.
All right, okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
I don't understand, I want to go back to the character map. Can you explain that? I mean, so what would trigger this, or how would it be triggered, or why? I've just never seen something like this before.
So typically, and this is typical of other jurisdictions, I think. Typically, you'd require a plan, let's say a rezoning, to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Occasionally, so in that regard, it's consistent with the future land use map and the future character map for the city. So if there is an application out there that wants to, oh hey, I've got a great idea, but it doesn't quite match the future land use map for one reason or another, they can petition or apply to change that parcel of the land use map from one designation to another.
The
and thereby
property owner or anybody?
the property owner.
So that says citizens can request changes.
Yes, and I believe the code language, you have that up, Jennifer? It would require the property owner's consent in order to change that. And we could make sure that it does that.
So the citizens putting in the application, not the property owner.
The property owner would have to give their consent.
Okay, but the citizens putting in the petition or the application, part of that packet would include sign off from the property owner that they approve this.
Absolutely.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, well, so the property owner would have to be involved in that request.
And that's how it always is.
I thought you said they were making the request.
most likely, the property owners would make the request.
I do this one the same.
If I may, let me add, I think what perhaps Mike, you confirmed for me, but I think what you're alluding to is a very common practice where a developer may come in and look at a very specific parcel. They have put a contract on the property, and therefore they are the ones who approach for this potential change with the consent of the property owner. We see that a lot in all sorts of development applications, so I'm assuming that's what you're trying to cover, is that kind of thing?
Yes, thank you, Mark, that put it a lot clearly.
Yeah, because the owner always has to sign off.
Yeah.
Right.
Right up
Okay, so this is not citizens, these are,
The developer.
could be anybody, could be the developer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the property, citizens meaning a property owner, being a citizen.
It's not gonna be, you're not gonna come in and try to change my parcel. It's not gonna be, I wanna change that person's.
Not all property owners are citizens, though.
Yeah, well,
Columbine, for instance.
right, I think I confused
Found
it.
property owners?
There's nothing in the proposed amendment that refers to anyone as a citizen, it's applicant. So an applicant.
There you go, the applicant can request.
Yeah, see, this is why.
Mike.
No, I know.
Yeah, take away that title you gave yourself.
It's the messiest 2-minute presentation. You should have seen the review of this thing. It was a gauntlet.
Okay, so this works like a zoning, okay, so as an applicant would come in and ask for a zoning change, they may not need a zoning change, but they may need a character change based on what, so it would kind of follow that same process. And the applicant would come in and request a character change, which doesn't necessarily mean they're requesting a zoning change.
Correct.
Would probably be leading to a zoning change.
They would probably be related, I would guess, in all likelihood.
But this would allow that an applicant can come in and just ask for a character change without it being a zoning change.
Yeah.
And would it follow the same process that a zoning change would follow?
Yes, they would be similar processes. Yeah, they would go through the planning commission and the city council for a final decision.
This is all really good information to include in our communication.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah, I
first.
can make that much.
Yep,
Yeah,
good
just
job.
clarify that. So mostly what you guys need is to let us know this is coming, and I think we've got dates set.
There you go.
Okay.
The purpose of tonight.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. Kyle?
I just have one question, probably for Reed, with the actual ordinance here. It says,
You got all excited, this first question.
but it says, council shall cause the preparation. Is that just, it just sounds awkward. Is that?
What section are you referring to?
10-1-10A, when it says preparation, city council shall cause the preparation. For some reason, that just reads awkward to me.
Little editor.
Shall prepare?
Shall prepare, shall
I think
approve.
Mr. Sutherland put.
Oh, okay, that makes sense then. I didn't know if that was legal.
Okay, are we good on this?
We'll change it for you.
Okay,
We're good. Are you guys?
we're good.
I think this took longer than 10 minutes, Mike.
Yeah, Mike,
Oh.
us.
Oh, I don't think so.
My watch says 2 minutes.
It's not 10 o'clock yet. We're good.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wait.
We'll get moving on it right away.
Okay, perfect. We do have one other issue that we need to deal with, and Mark, you want to handle that?
Please. So, on Monday evening, I sent all of council here a description of a project here that South Metro Housing Options is pursuing here relative to a HUD grant. And I also attached to that a copy of just a draft letter of support. So my question to you that I posed in that email was, are you comfortable enough, based on the information provided, that you would feel comfortable with me signing this letter of support for Schmo to pursue this HUD application?
I am.
I am. Okay, there's enough.
All right, that's it.
Easy enough.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
All right, council, we will see you Monday, 6:30 in this room. Yeah, for our transportation master plan.
Wish I could
think that's all we got. Sure. Yeah. And then, don't forget August 15th, which is Thursday, correct?
That's correct.
We have our breakfast meeting with the school board. It's at the Littleton Museum, starts at 7:30. It's this Thursday.
August 15th?
Yes, this Thursday. And you guys will
Oh,
get.
day after tomorrow. You said museum, right?
Yeah.
Museum.
And you guys will get, a copy of the agenda probably I don't know, where we at, the day before.
Actually, we posted the agenda here this afternoon, but I'll send it to you directly.
Okay.
So,
And
Study sessions go.
then I want to just let everybody know that our meeting on August 20th, on the tentative, we've had a study session start there. We're actually not doing that study session. We are instead replacing that with an exec. That'll be at 5:30. We'll have dinner brought in for the exec. And then we will have our regular meeting. The South Metro Housing Options candidate interviews, Mark and I are working on where those will go. Do we know how many we have?
I don't.
Okay, we're still kind of in flux on that, so those will end up at another date. We'll let you guys know on that. The Fine Arts Board discussion will be postponed, moved out. That is going to probably meld into a larger discussion that we'll do in a couple months or so regarding the Arts and Culture Commission. And I'll talk to you offline, Karina. So that'll be August 20th, 5:30 start time, dinner, exec session, and then we'll go into our meeting, and there will not be a study session. It's exec.
And we're already scheduled anyway, so that's good. Okay.
Okay. That's
So,
it.
I'm sorry, breakfast was with who again?
The public schools.
Yes, okay.
And I don't know if we have done it on the agenda yet, or on the dais yet, if we've actually canceled the date, but we are canceling the regular meeting, election night meeting.
That's on the calendar.
Okay, so that will be, I don't think we've officially done it at the
I don't think
dais.
so.
So we'll get that on an agenda and make that official, all right?
And for everyone, that Thursday is City Hall Selfie Day.
Okay, so what again?
Thursday again.
What is it?
City Hall Selfie Day, take a picture with your council member. We're adjourned.
Thank you.